What if the past isn't as settled as we think? Hidden in dusty archives, ancient ruins, and forgotten corners of the world lie secrets that challenge everything we know. Mysterious civilizations, unexplained disappearances, and shocking events that history barely whispers about. They've been waiting centuries for someone to notice. From shadowed battlefields to enigmatic artifacts, every clue raises more questions than answers. What really happened? And why was it hidden from us? So sit back, relax, and let's dive into 3 hours of history's biggest mysteries you didn't know, where every revelation might change the way you see the past. The city of Constantinople, straddling the ancient divide between Europe and Asia, had long been celebrated as a marvel of human civilization. Its imposing walls, gleaming marble palaces, and bustling harbors spoke of wealth, power, and an unshakable sense of permanence. Yet, in the year 746, the city faced a phenomenon that would defy explanation. A dense, impenetrable black fog that seemed to seep from the very air, swallowing streets, rooftops, and the great domes of its churches in a suffocating shadow. Contemporary accounts describe it as an unnatural darkness, a pall so thick that sunlight was blotted out even at midday. Lanterns flickered helplessly, their feeble glow swallowed by the haze. People stumbled through familiar streets as if navigating an alien landscape, coughing, disoriented, and gripped by an inexplicable unease. Some chroniclers noted a sudden chill, while others described a choking smell, though the sources of these sensations remain unclear. How could such a fog appear so suddenly, and with such precise intensity only over the heart of the city? Historians have long sought rational explanations. One theory suggests that a volcanic eruption, perhaps distant, perhaps local, could have spewed ash and particles high into the atmosphere, which then drifted down to cloak the city. Another posits that unique meteorological conditions, stagnant air, temperature inversions, and smoke from open fires may have combined to trap pollution in a dense layer. Yet these naturalistic accounts encounter difficulties. Volcanic activity sufficient to darken the skies would likely have left traces in geological records, and widespread smoke events would have been noted elsewhere. The black fog, by contrast, seems almost localized, affecting Constantinople with a specificity that strains conventional explanation. Even more curious are the accounts of its effects on the human mind and body. Chroniclers wrote of sudden fatigue, nausea, and fainting, suggesting that the fog carried more than mere particles. Some described a palpable sense of dread, as if the city itself had been enveloped in a living, watching presence. While modern science can only speculate, perhaps airborne toxins, fungal spores, or pathogens, the persistence of these descriptions invites further questioning. Was the fog entirely natural, or did it harbor an unseen, perhaps even psychological dimension? Speculative theories have emerged over centuries, some of which are difficult to reconcile with contemporary skepticism. Certain writers of the period attributed the phenomenon to divine intervention, a celestial punishment delivered to the proud and populous city. Others, drawing upon the darker currents of myth and folklore, imagined a malevolent force, an almost sentient shadow that moved through the streets, unseen yet felt. While such interpretations do not align with modern historiography, the consistency of these reports across different chroniclers and social classes remains striking. How could so many witnesses perceive the fog in nearly identical ways if it were entirely ordinary? Material evidence is scant. Layers of sediment, pollen, and ash preserved in the region do not indicate a single catastrophic environmental event. Port records suggest disruptions in shipping, yet documentation is incomplete, leaving historians with only fragments of the city's response. Archaeological excavation reveals little beyond the usual urban layers of debris and reconstruction. The silence of material evidence contrasts sharply with the vividness of human testimony, raising questions about the limits of historical memory. What remains lost to time, and what might yet be discovered beneath the city's foundations? Even the duration of the fog remains uncertain. Some sources imply it lasted only hours, others suggest several days. If it persisted, how did the citizens of Constantinople survive its oppressive weight? And why did it disappear as suddenly as it arrived? Was it guided by forces beyond human understanding, or simply the product of fleeting, extraordinary environmental conditions? The more one examines the chronicles, the more tantalizing the mystery becomes, revealing gaps in knowledge that no amount of modern analysis can entirely fill. And then there is the question of wider context. The year 746 was a period of political turbulence and natural upheaval in the region, with neighboring territories experiencing their own environmental and social disruptions. Could the black fog have been part of a larger pattern, something connected to volcanic activity, climate anomalies, or even a previously unrecognized ecological phenomenon? Or was it unique, a singular event that remains isolated in the historical record, a shadow over a city that has long since reclaimed its streets. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect is the fog's almost human-like quality, the way witnesses describe its movement, its sudden appearance, and its selective embrace of the city. Was it a warning, a message, or simply an event that challenged the perception of reality? And if it could happen once, could it happen again somewhere at some other point in history unnoticed and unrecorded? The black fog of Constantinople refuses easy explanation. It lingers in the margins of the historical record, a puzzle that invites us to consider not only the past, but the boundaries of knowledge itself. Even now, as we study the chronicles and sift through fragments of evidence, the fog's true nature eludes us. Was it natural, supernatural, or something entirely different, something beyond comprehension? The answers remain just out of reach, suspended in the same shadowy haze that once enveloped the great city. As the memory of Constantinople's black fog fades, leaving shadows over centuries of history, we turn our gaze northward to a city where silence itself became a mystery. No, nestled along the winding banks of the Vilov River was once a thriving center of trade and culture. Its wooden streets are alive with the clatter of carts and the voices of merchants. Amidst its bustling life, the city's churches stood as symbols of faith and civic pride, their bells traditionally calling the faithful to prayer and marking the rhythms of daily life. Yet sometime in the medieval period, an enigmatic silence began to settle over Novgorod, one that would puzzle chroniclers and travelers for generations. The silent bells, as they came to be known, were not ordinary bells simply left unused. According to surviving accounts, certain church towers would no longer resonate when struck. Their tones were muted, hollow, or vanished entirely. Travelers passing through the city noted the absence immediately where one would expect the rich, sonorous rolls of bronze. There was nothing but a profound quiet, as if the bells themselves had been swallowed by the air. Some records suggest that the phenomenon affected only specific bells, while others hint at entire towers rendered mute. How could instruments designed to echo across the city suddenly fail without visible damage or clear cause? Historians have considered practical explanations first. Bells are, after all, subject to wear, metal fatigue, and poor casting, and it is plausible that poorly maintained or defective bells could lose their sound over time. Others point to changes in construction, wooden towers settling unevenly, vibrations dampened by structural shifts, or the use of new alloys with unusual acoustic properties. Yet these explanations do not account for reports that some bells, once silent, would unpredictably ring again, while others remained muted indefinitely. Nor do they explain chroniclers' repeated references to the phenomenon in terms that suggest something more than mere physical decay. The voice has gone from the bell, one 15th century monk wrote, as though the instrument had lost its soul. Even more curious are the accounts of those who claim to hear faint echoes, not of the bells themselves, but of distant ghostly tones. Bells ringing far away, yet imperceptible to anyone standing nearby. Could this have been an auditory illusion, a trick of architecture and acoustics, or something else entirely? Modern acoustic analysis suggests that subtle shifts in air temperature, humidity, and wind patterns can create unusual sound propagation. Yet such effects are temporary and inconsistent. The persistence of reports over decades, sometimes centuries, raises questions about whether the silent bells were more than an accident of physics. Speculation stretches further. Some chroniclers believed the silence to be a warning or a sign. In a city frequently threatened by war, famine, and political upheaval, the absence of the bell's sound could have been interpreted as an omen, a signal that something unseen was amiss. Others suggested supernatural interference, spirits of the dead, angered ancestors, or protective entities that sought to mute the bells for reasons lost to time. While these interpretations cannot be verified, the consistency with which they appear in different manuscripts, often separated by decades, invites reflection on how deeply this phenomenon affected the city's collective consciousness. The material record offers little clarity. Many of the affected bells were later recast or replaced, their original forms lost. Church inventories, architectural plans, and municipal records provide sporadic documentation, but rarely address the reason for the silence. Travelers' accounts, while more vivid, are sometimes contradictory. One might describe the bells of the Cathedral of St. Sophia as dead and voiceless, while another a few years later claims to hear them ringing faintly at dusk. Was the phenomenon intermittent, or was memory shaping perception in ways that modern historians cannot fully reconstruct? Archaeological investigation adds more questions than answers. Examination of surviving towers and their mounts reveals no clear structural anomalies that could fully account for the loss of sound. Metallurgical analysis of remaining bells hints at minor inconsistencies in alloy composition, but nothing so profound as to silence an instrument entirely. Could environmental factors such as subtle magnetic anomalies, atmospheric conditions, or even long-forgotten ritual practices have interacted with the bells in ways we cannot recreate? The evidence, like the bells themselves, seems to oscillate between presence and absence, tangible yet elusive. Some scholars have drawn connections to broader historical patterns. Novgorod, a crossroads of northern trade routes, faced periods of intense social and environmental stress. Could the silent bells reflect a response to disease, famine, or political turmoil, intentionally muted as part of ritual or civic action? Or were they merely victims of coincidence, their silence amplified in human memory because it was so unexpected? The city's chroniclers rarely speculate without recording the phenomenon, yet the lack of definitive explanation leaves the story open, a historical question without resolution. And there is the human element, the way the absence of sound reshapes experience. Bells are more than instruments. They are markers of time, signals of community, and carriers of tradition. To stand in Novgorod when the silent bells fell quiet was to feel a gap in the rhythm of life itself, a reminder that even familiar structures can harbor mysteries beyond comprehension. Could the city itself, its towers and streets, have absorbed some unknown force, something that interfered with the very resonance of bronze and air? Or is the silence simply the echo of centuries, a metaphorical pause that reminds us how much of history lies just out of reach? The silent bells of Novgorod, like the black fog of Constantinople before them, resist closure. They invite contemplation not only of historical fact, but of the limits of our knowledge, the fragility of human perception, and the possibility that the world holds phenomena, both subtle and profound, waiting patiently for notice. Even now, as we sift through records and remnants, the bell's muted tones linger in imagination, a quiet mystery that continues to resonate through time. And so, as we move deeper into the unexplored corners of history's forgotten enigmas, the question remains: what other silences, what other gaps in sound, thought, and record might still be hidden, waiting for someone to hear them once more? As the silence of Novgorod's bells fades from our thoughts, we shift our attention far from medieval streets to a place where silence took a far more deadly form. Quiet so complete that it became lethal. High in the volcanic highlands of Cameroon lies Lake Nyos, a deep crater lake surrounded by verdant hills. Its waters are dark and seemingly serene. For centuries, it slumbered undisturbed, a mirror reflecting the sky, the forest, and the clouds above. Hiding within its depths, a secret that would in 1986 claim the lives of more than 1,700 people in a single incomprehensible night. The lake appears ordinary at first glance. Its calm surface belies the layers of complexity beneath, where carbon dioxide gas slowly accumulates in the deep, colder waters trapped by the weight of the water above. Yet this scientific explanation, understood only in recent decades, only hints at the horror that unfolded. Local villagers accustomed to the quiet majesty of the lake had no warning as the night air suddenly thickened. Families sleeping in their homes awoke to an invisible, suffocating blanket, while livestock lay motionless, their eyes open in uncomprehending stillness. In mere moments, the tranquility of Lake Nyos transformed into a scene of incomprehensible devastation. Contemporary reports paint a chilling picture. Survivors spoke of a dense fog rolling over their homes, a paw of air that seemed heavier than normal. Windows and doors were left open, yet no sound, no cry could be heard from those already overcome. Trees swayed gently in the night breeze, indifferent to the tragedy below. When daylight came, the scale of the catastrophe was revealed. Entire villages emptied of life, belongings left in place, and an eerie stillness hanging over the land. How could so many die so quickly with so few external signs in a place that had seemed so safe for generations? Scientists have offered an explanation rooted in geophysics. Lake Nyos sits atop a volcanic vent where carbon dioxide seeps from underground magma pockets into the water. Over time, the gas accumulates in the deep layers of the lake, forming a dense, invisible reservoir. When the gas is suddenly released, a phenomenon known as a limnic eruption, it displaces oxygen, creating a deadly cloud that can suffocate all living creatures in its path. Field studies and monitoring systems installed after the disaster have provided compelling evidence for this mechanism, offering a rare glimpse into one of nature's more obscure but lethal processes. Yet even this explanation, grounded in measurable science, cannot fully capture the experience of that night. What triggers such a sudden release, and why had it never occurred on this scale before? Could subtle shifts in temperature, rainfall, or even seismic tremors have disturbed the delicate equilibrium of the lake? And if such forces are so difficult to predict, could similar silent killers exist elsewhere in lakes and waters thought to be benign? The lake's calm surface belies a tension that human senses cannot perceive, a hidden danger that waited patiently beneath for centuries. Local legends, too, offer a layer of mystery. Some villagers recalled strange happenings in the months preceding the disaster. Unusual animal behavior, faint odors, and an oppressive atmosphere lingering over the hills. Others spoke of spirits or ancestral warnings carried in dreams, subtle signs of an impending calamity. While these accounts cannot be verified scientifically, they echo the universal human instinct to sense threats beyond immediate perception, a reminder that phenomena like Lake Nyos have long challenged the limits of understanding. The aftermath of the disaster introduced yet another enigma. How could a lake, previously so quiet and unassuming, regain its place in daily life for nearby communities? Evacuated villagers eventually returned, rebuilding homes and farms along its shores, even as scientists continued to monitor the gas levels. Pipes now vent carbon dioxide from the lake's depths, a modern intervention that tames a natural force, but cannot erase the memory of its silent fury. And yet, questions linger. Is the lake's equilibrium truly stable? Or is this catastrophe a temporary reprieve, a brief pause before nature reclaims its power in ways we cannot anticipate? We cannot compare it to other historical events to add further intrigue. Lake Nyos' sudden lethality recalls other moments in history when invisible forces, whether fogs, gases, or atmospheric anomalies, have altered the course of human life without warning. Like Constantinople's Black Fog or Norod's Silent Bells, these events blur the line between the natural and the mysterious, leaving traces in memory, records, and oral histories that demand attention but resist simple explanation. Are they coincidences, isolated events, or part of a broader hidden pattern in our world? And then there is the human experience, the way proximity to a silent killer shapes memory and culture. Survivors describe the night in hushed tones, as if speaking too loudly might awaken it again. The landscape itself, once benign and inviting, now carries a weight of unease. Children are warned to respect the water's edge, and visitors are reminded that beneath the placid surface lies an invisible force, patient and impartial, capable of ending life without warning. In this way, Lake Nyos serves as a reminder not only of nature's power, but of the mysteries that remain hidden from our senses, waiting in silence for the moment to reveal themselves. Even with scientific understanding, the lake retains its aura of mystery. How many other lakes or geological formations harbor similar unnoticed dangers? Could the conditions that led to the 1986 disaster recur elsewhere? Or are they unique to this specific intersection of magma, water, and geography? And perhaps most hauntingly, how do human beings perceive and respond to threats that cannot be seen, heard, or touched, yet are capable of extinguishing life in an instant? Lake Nyos in its calm, reflective presence reminds us that mystery is not always rooted in the past. Some enigmas emerge in real time, shaping human experience with a quiet but undeniable force. Like the black fog of Constantinople and the silent bells of Novgorod before it, the mass deaths at Lake Nyos invite us to question not only what we know, but what remains hidden, waiting silently beneath the surface, beyond the reach of ordinary perception. From the silent waters of Lake Nyos, where nature's quiet lethality claims lives in an instant, we move across oceans and centuries to a place of ice, wind, and isolation. Greenland. Long before it became a land mapped by explorers and colonists, Greenland was home to the Skrælings, a term used by Norse settlers to describe the indigenous peoples who lived along its coasts and fjords. For centuries, these communities navigated the harsh Arctic environment with remarkable skill, hunting seals, caribou, and fish. Their lives are intimately tied to the rhythms of ice and sea. Yet, despite their resilience, the Skrælings would vanish from historical records, leaving behind traces of their existence and a profound mystery that has puzzled historians and archaeologists alike. The landscape itself conveys the enormity of the challenge. Towering icebergs float silently in frigid waters, glaciers grind slowly against the rocky coast, and winters stretch long with darkness dominating much of the year. Here, survival required ingenuity, careful planning, and deep knowledge of the environment. Archaeological evidence shows settlements with sod houses, intricate hunting tools, and communal spaces that suggest organized societies. Yet by the time Europeans fully mapped the region, the Skrælings had disappeared, leaving only skeletal remains, abandoned dwellings, and tantalizing artifacts to hint at their lives. What could have caused such a complete disappearance in a land that had supported them for centuries? Mainstream explanations often focus on environmental and climatic factors. Greenland's Little Ice Age, beginning in the 14th century, brought harsher winters, shorter growing seasons, and unpredictable sea ice, which would have made traditional hunting and travel far more dangerous. Food scarcity combined with isolation could have led to gradual depopulation. Disease introduced either by Norse settlers or through natural cycles may also have played a role. Yet even these plausible factors leave gaps. Evidence suggests that some Skraeling communities survived longer than expected, adapting remarkably to the environment. Why then did they ultimately vanish from both Norse records and archaeological visibility? Interactions with Norse settlers add another layer of intrigue. The Norse established colonies in southern Greenland around the 10th century, engaging in trade, occasional conflict, and cultural exchange with the Skraelings. Sagas recount encounters, some peaceful, some violent, but the historical record is fragmentary and filtered through European perspectives. Did the pressures of colonization, conflict over resources, or cultural disruption contribute to the disappearance? Or were the Skraelings able to retreat further into uncharted regions, leaving no trace for later chroniclers to find? Speculation stretches further. Some researchers propose that the Skraelings may have migrated eastward, seeking more favorable climates, or joining other indigenous populations along the coasts of what is now Canada. Others suggest more dramatic possibilities: localized epidemics that decimated entire communities, or natural disasters, floods, avalanches, or sea ice collapses that erased settlements in moments, leaving only fragmentary archaeological evidence. While these theories cannot be confirmed, the gaps in the record are undeniable. Entire communities can vanish from sight, leaving only whispers in sagas and traces in the earth, challenging our assumptions about permanence and survival. The material record offers tantalizing hints but few answers. Excavations have uncovered tools, remnants of dwellings, and middens filled with animal bones, revealing much about diet and daily life. Yet many of these sites are difficult to date precisely, and organic materials often decay rapidly in Arctic conditions, erasing evidence before it can be studied. Artifacts suggest a sophisticated culture adapted to extreme conditions. Yet the sudden absence of these communities remains a haunting void. Can absence itself be considered evidence of a larger story, or does it only deepen the mystery? Cultural memory also plays a role. Norse accounts mention the Skraelings in ways that are at once descriptive and enigmatic, hinting at societies that were complex, mobile, and capable of strategic withdrawal. Inuit oral traditions passed down through generations recall interactions with strange visitors and disappearances in the far north. Though details are scarce, the convergence of these narratives across cultures suggests that something significant happened, an event or series of events that left its mark on human memory, even if the physical traces have faded. And yet, the Arctic landscape endures. Snow and ice reclaim abandoned settlements, and the sea slowly erases footprints along frozen coasts. The land itself seems to guard its secrets, offering glimpses of a vibrant past, only to withdraw them again. What happened to the Greenland Skraelings may never be fully understood. Were they victims of climate, disease, conflict, or a combination of forces that compounded over time? Or did they simply choose deliberately or instinctively to leave one world behind and disappear into another, leaving history with only fragments to ponder? The story of the Skraelings reminds us that disappearance is not always dramatic or violent. It can be subtle, cumulative, and almost imperceptible. A society can vanish from view while leaving behind traces that challenge modern assumptions about endurance and survival. Like the silent pall of Lake Nyos or the vanished tones of Novgorod's bells, the Skraelings' disappearance asks us to confront the limits of our knowledge and the mysteries that lie in the spaces between recorded history and what the Earth itself preserves. Even today, as scientists, archaeologists, and historians piece together fragments of evidence, the Greenland Skraelings remain an enigma. Their disappearance is a quiet testament to the impermanence of human societies, the power of environment, and the resilience and fragility of those who once thrived in some of the most inhospitable regions on Earth. And as we reflect on their absence, we are left with a question that resonates beyond Greenland. How many other peoples, cultures, or communities have quietly vanished from history, leaving behind only echoes, artifacts, and stories that hint at what once was? From the icy silence of Greenland, where entire communities vanished into the Arctic night, we return to the heart of civilization itself, to the city that was once the beating center of an empire, Rome. For centuries, the Tiber River had been the lifeblood of the city, winding through its streets, carrying trade, water, and the reflections of marble temples under the sun. But one night, long before the era of modern records, the Tiber did something no one could have predicted. It ran black, a phenomenon so shocking that contemporary chroniclers struggled to describe it, leaving behind accounts steeped in awe, fear, and uncertainty. The river, usually a muted brown, flowed as if ink had been poured into it, the waters opaque, heavy, and strangely still in places. Fish floated lifelessly along the surface, and the usual hum of activity on its banks fell silent. Lamps and torches cast distorted reflections on the inky water, creating a world that felt both familiar and terrifyingly alien. Citizens awoke to find the city transformed overnight, a Rome shrouded in darkness, as if the river itself had absorbed some secret malice. How could the Tiber, a river that had carried the lifeblood of the empire for centuries, turn so completely against the city that it had nourished? Historians have long attempted to reconcile these accounts with natural explanations. One theory points to the possibility of volcanic ash or sediment washed downstream, though no major eruptions in the immediate region coincide precisely with the records. Another hypothesis involves industrial or arterial runoff, perhaps from tanneries or metal works that released iron or other minerals into the river in unusual concentrations. Seasonal flooding could have stirred deep sediments, darkening the water temporarily. Yet these theories, while plausible, fail to fully account for the immediate horror and widespread panic described in contemporary texts or the consistency with which witnesses reported an almost supernatural darkness. Contemporary sources such as Roman chroniclers emphasize the psychological impact as much as the physical. Citizens described an oppressive stillness, as if the river had absorbed the city's voice. The animals along the banks behaved strangely. Birds avoided the water entirely, and dogs howled at the unnatural hue. Some priests and soothsayers interpreted the phenomenon as a divine warning, a portent of impending calamity for the empire. Others claimed that the river itself had been cursed by unseen forces, though no explicit event was tied to the curse. Could it be that the Tiber, so central to Roman life, had become a vessel for anxieties, fears, and warnings encoded into collective consciousness? There are also accounts suggesting that the discoloration was intermittent, as though the river itself could shift between its ordinary state and the ominous blackness. Scholars speculate that chemical or microbial activity could have created sudden blooms, darkening the surface in ways that would appear immediate and unnatural. But the speed, scale, and timing of the transformation, as described in texts, challenge the boundaries of known science. Could environmental triggers alone create such a dramatic effect? Or did the phenomenon involve forces we still fail to understand, perhaps hidden currents or unknown reactions in the water? Political and social context may offer additional insight. The Tiber ran through a city rife with tension where rumors, uprisings, and political intrigue were common. The river's sudden transformation may have intensified collective fears, giving rise to stories that grew in the telling. Could the Black River, in part, be a reflection of the anxieties and uncertainties of Rome itself, a psychological as well as a physical event? In times of upheaval, how much of what is recorded is literal, and how much is amplified by human perception struggling to make sense of the inexplicable? Archaeological evidence adds another layer of complexity. Sediment cores taken from the Tiber reveal layers of volcanic ash, pollutants, and organic material, but none that conclusively match the precise timing or nature of the Black River accounts. Yet the river's dynamic environment, constantly shifting with floods, debris, and seasonal changes, means that the geological record may never fully capture ephemeral events. Is it possible that some episodes, no matter how dramatic, leave no permanent trace, surviving only in memory and written word? Even today, the story of the Tiber running black resonates, a reminder that rivers are not merely lifeless channels, but dynamic, almost sentient forces in human history. They carry not only water, but the weight of human activity, belief, and fear. Could the Tiber's black waters have symbolized something deeper to the Romans, a warning they felt in their bones even if they could not articulate it fully? Or was it an extraordinary natural event misinterpreted through the lens of culture, religion, and superstition? The night the Tiber ran black like the vanished Greenland Skraelings, the mass deaths at Lake Nyos, or the silent bells of Novgorod, reminds us that history is as much about absence as presence, as much about the mysteries that evade explanation as the facts we can record. The river returned to its ordinary state. The city resumed its routines, and yet the memory of that night lingered, woven into stories and chroniclers' accounts, a reminder that even the most familiar landscapes can suddenly reveal their strangeness. And so, as we follow the threads of history's enigmas across time and space, the Tiber's dark night invites us to ask, what other moments have slipped through the cracks of memory, recorded only in fleeting impressions, leaving us to wonder at the hidden forces that shape the world? How many rivers like the Tiber carry secrets we may never fully understand, flowing quietly through the centuries, waiting for someone to notice their extraordinary moments? From the inky waters of the Tiber, whose sudden darkness once unsettled the heart of Rome, we travel across continents and centuries to the high desert of the American Southwest, where another civilization faced a disappearance that has perplexed historians and archaeologists alike. Choco Canyon in present-day New Mexico was the heart of Anastasia or ancestral Pueblo society, a place of towering stone, great houses, ceremonial cause, and astronomical alignments that speak to a sophisticated culture deeply attuned to the rhythms of the land and sky. Yet by the late 12th century, the elite population that had shaped this extraordinary society vanished, leaving behind monumental architecture, intricate artifacts, and questions that remain unresolved. The landscape itself is stark and imposing. Red sandstone cliffs rise abruptly from the desert floor, framing the canyon like natural fortifications. Sunlight paints the walls in shifting hues of copper and gold, while the shadows of meat stretch across open plazas. Within this terrain, Choco's great houses, multi-story complexes of stone and timber, once housed hundreds, perhaps thousands of people. Their walls echo with the footsteps, voices, and ceremonies of a thriving society. Today, these structures stand silent, weathered by centuries, a testament to human ambition and ingenuity, and a monument to absence. Historical and archaeological records provide some clues. Excavations reveal that Choco Canyon was a hub of trade and culture, connected to surrounding regions by an extensive network of roads stretching over hundreds of miles. Artifacts from distant lands, including shells from the Pacific coast, turquoise from nearby mines, and copper from as far away as the Great Lakes, attest to long-distance dance exchange and influence. Yet the sophisticated social organization, ceremonial hierarchy, and monumental construction seem to have dissipated suddenly. By the end of the 12th century, the elite families and leaders, the administrators of Choco's complex society, had disappeared from both material evidence and oral memory. What could compel such a carefully organized and resilient community to vanish from its own homeland? Mainstream explanations often point to environmental stress. Dendrochronological studies of tree rings indicate that the region experienced prolonged droughts during the 12th century, severely impacting water supplies and agriculture. Scarce food and declining resources could have forced communities to disperse, seeking more fertile lands elsewhere. Social strain, competition over limited resources, and internal political upheaval may have compounded the crisis. Yet even with these pressures, the rapid and complete disappearance of the Choco elite remains extraordinary. How could a society so well established with monumental buildings and elaborate trade networks unravel so thoroughly, leaving only empty stone walls as evidence? Speculative theories add further layers of intrigue. Some researchers suggest that spiritual or ritual factors may have played a role, perhaps driving relocation or migration in response to omens, celestial events, or ceremonial cycles. Others propose that conflict, whether internal power struggles or external raids, could have destabilized the elite hierarchy, leading to a sudden exodus. There are even hints in the archaeological record of a shift in settlement patterns. Smaller dispersed communities emerged in surrounding areas after the decline of Choco, suggesting a deliberate decentralization. Could the disappearance have been less a collapse than a strategic dispersal, a conscious reorganization that left the grand structures empty but ensured cultural survival elsewhere? Material evidence offers tantalizing but inconclusive hints. Ceremonial objects such as finely crafted pottery and intricately carved turquoise pieces are found abandoned in situ, suggesting a sudden departure. Walls of Ka's and great houses remain intact, yet their upper levels often show signs of careful dismantling or removal of timber, hinting at human intent rather than catastrophic destruction. In contrast, ordinary domestic artifacts appear to have been taken, buried, or decayed, making it difficult to reconstruct the daily life of those who left. What choices were made during this disappearance? And what does that tell us about the people themselves? Astronomical alignment and architectural precision offer additional enigmas. Many Choco structures were aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and lunar cycles, indicating a profound understanding of celestial patterns. Could these alignments have guided migration or ritual practice? Did the disappearance of the elite correspond with astronomical events or with changes in ceremonial timing that dictated social and political structures? If so, what does this suggest about the integration of spirituality, governance, and environmental adaptation in Anastasia society? Human imagination and oral history extend the mystery. While no direct descendants record the events of Choco Canyon, Navajo and Hopi oral traditions preserve stories of migration, loss, and spiritual journeys that echo the archaeological silence. These narratives hint at memory as a vessel for understanding disappearance, not only what happened, but what it meant to those who lived through it and to the generations that followed. The absence of the elite, combined with traces of continued cultural presence elsewhere, suggests that disappearance need not equate to extinction. Yet, it leaves a profound void that challenges reconstruction. The canyon, silent now except for wind and bird song, carries an enduring presence of absence. Empty plazas, partially collapsed walls, and distant roads stretching to unknown destinations evoke questions that defy definitive answers. How many other civilizations have reorganized, migrated, or disappeared without leaving written records, leaving only echoes in stone and memory? And what drives such dramatic shifts? The environment, social forces, spiritual guidance, or some combination of factors that we cannot fully comprehend? The vanishing of the Choco elite reminds us that history is never fully complete. Every civilization, no matter how complex or resilient, is subject to forces that can alter its trajectory in ways we may never fully understand. Like the Tyre's Black Knight, the Greenland's Greylings, or Lake Nyos, Choco's disappearance asks us to consider the fragility of human societies, the impermanence of power, and the mysteries that linger quietly in the ruins of human achievement. And so, standing in the shadow of Choco Canyon's stone towers, one cannot help but wonder, where did these leaders go? And why did they leave so completely? What might their disappearance tell us about resilience, adaptation, and the choices societies make when faced with insurmountable challenges? The answers remain hidden, waiting for those willing to listen to the silence left behind. From the sun-baked cliffs of Choco Canyon, where the Anastasia elite vanished into the desert with little trace, we turn to the heart of medieval Europe, to a city of power, learning, and sudden strange disturbance. Ain. In the 9th century, Ain was more than a city. It was the seat of Charlemagne's empire, a center of political and religious authority. Its palaces and chapels gleaming with marble and gold, its streets alive with the footfalls of courtiers, clerics, and artisans. Yet in this city of order and grandeur, something extraordinary occurred. An event that descended from the sky itself, coating the streets, rooftops, and countryside in a mysterious rain of ash. Contemporary chroniclers described the phenomenon with awe and unease. One morning, citizens awoke to find the world transformed. Rooftops, gardens, and public squares coated in a fine gray powder. The air was thick with particulate matter that dimmed the sunlight and choked the breath. Livestock grew uneasy, coughing and stirring in panic, while people reported nausea and irritation in their eyes and throats. The ash fell steadily, lingering for days, creating a landscape at once familiar and alien. What could have sent this foreign substance cascading from the heavens, turning the streets of a thriving empire into something resembling a volcanic wasteland? Historians have long debated natural explanations. Volcanic activity, though undocumented in the immediate region, remains a plausible source. Ash clouds can travel vast distances, carried by wind, from eruptions hundreds, even thousands of kilometers away, and still fall densely upon distant lands. Some studies suggest that events in Iceland or southern Europe could have produced such airborne debris, but the historical and geological records remain inconclusive. Could a volcanic eruption, perhaps unrecorded or forgotten, have silently transformed the European sky into a harbinger of disruption? Others point to atmospheric phenomena. Powerful storms, sudden shifts in wind patterns, or intense fires in surrounding regions could have lofted soot and ash high into the atmosphere where it eventually descended upon Ain. Yet the reports consistently describe ash of an unusual consistency, fine, almost powdery, not the coarser soot of a forest fire. And intriguingly, the fallout appeared selective in its intensity, blanketing some neighborhoods more heavily than others, creating strange patterns on rooftops and roads. Why did the ash seem to target certain areas, as if guided by invisible forces beyond mere meteorology? Medieval interpretations offer another dimension. Chroniclers framed the ash rain as a portent, a warning from God, a signal of divine displeasure. In an era when celestial and terrestrial events were inseparable from human morality, the sudden unexplained descent of ash may have stirred both fear and reflection. Some accounts even linked it to the political turbulence of Charlemagne's empire, interpreting the phenomenon as a message to rulers and citizens alike. Could perception shaped by belief have amplified the terror of a natural event, making the ash rain seem both physical and symbolic? Scientific analysis of contemporary analogies provides partial insight. Volcanologists note that fine ash transported over long distances can remain suspended in the atmosphere for days, eventually settling in patterns that are highly dependent on wind, temperature, and humidity. Yet no definitive eruption has been identified as the source for the Ain event. Could it have been a small, isolated eruption, one that left minimal trace in the geological record, but produced a localized deluge of ash sufficient to disrupt life in the city? Or is it possible that multiple minor events converged, creating an unusual meteorological alchemical effect that medieval observers could only describe as supernatural? The human experience of the ash rain adds a haunting element. Chroniclers recount the disorientation of daily life, the muffled sounds of the city under a gray blanket, the sense of days stretching longer than they should, and the quiet anxiety in markets and streets. For a society dependent on agriculture, even a few days of ash could threaten crops, livestock, and water supplies, compounding fear with tangible risk. How did ordinary citizens interpret these subtle threats? Did the ash rain alter routines, influence decisions, or sow tension in ways that never reached the annals of history? Speculative theories venture even further. Some suggest that the ash may have had chemical properties unusual for ordinary volcanic fallout, perhaps affecting air quality, plant growth, or even human physiology in ways not fully understood. Others have proposed cometary or meteoric origins, a rare celestial event depositing particulate matter into the upper atmosphere before it fell upon the city. Though such claims remain unverified, the very persistence of speculation over centuries highlights the enduring mystery of the event, a moment when the heavens intervened in ways we're still trying to comprehend. Archaeological and environmental evidence adds fragments to the puzzle. Layers of soil sampled near Een show traces of ash-like material. Yet dating is imprecise and composition varies. There is no clear trace of catastrophic destruction suggesting that the event, while extraordinary, did not devastate the city physically. And yet the vivid accounts preserved in monasteries and chronicles suggest that the psychological impact was profound, a reminder that not all history is measured in ruins. Some is felt in the subtle ephemeral impressions that linger in human memory. The ash rain of Een, like the vanished Anastasia elite, the Tiber's Black Night, or Lake Neos, is a reminder that history is not always predictable. Nature can impose itself suddenly, transforming the familiar into the uncanny, challenging our understanding of the environment, human perception, and the fragility of urban life. And as we trace the gray residue across rooftops and into the chronicles of those who witnessed it, we are left to wonder how many other ephemeral events lost to time and incomplete records shaped societies in ways we can barely perceive. Even now, centuries later, the mystery remains. Could a volcanic eruption or distant celestial phenomenon have produced the ash rain? Or did a combination of meteorological, environmental, and human factors converge to create something wholly unexpected? Aitken, cloaked in ash that long ago, stands as a silent testament to the unknowable forces that occasionally disrupt the human world, reminding us that even in the heart of empire, mysteries can descend from the sky and leave their mark on history, seen, felt, and yet still unexplained. From the ash-coated streets of Een, where the sky itself seemed to rain mystery, we journey eastward across continents and centuries to a region of stark beauty and haunting isolation, Siberia. Here lies Lake Baal, the world's deepest and oldest freshwater lake, a ribbon of cobalt stretching over 600 km, flanked by rugged mountains and dense taiga forests. Its waters are famously clear, yet its depths conceal secrets both ancient and modern. Among these is the tale of the lost convoy of Lake Baikal, a series of disappearances that has puzzled historians, military analysts, and locals alike. The lake's sheer scale is awe-inspiring. In winter, its surface freezes into an unbroken sheet of ice, creating a surreal landscape of crystalline expanses, jagged pressure ridges, and distant snow-capped peaks. In summer, the water shimmers in deep blues and greens, reflecting the sky and surrounding cliffs. Yet beneath this serene surface lies a history tinged with unease. Historical accounts describe a convoy of military and supply transports traversing the lake only to vanish without explanation. Ships were never found, supplies disappeared, and men simply ceased to exist in a place otherwise inhospitable but navigable. How could an entire convoy be swallowed by a lake that had been crossed safely for centuries? Mainstream explanations often cite the region's treacherous conditions. Lake Baal is notorious for sudden storms with winds sweeping down from surrounding mountains, whipping waves into towering walls of water. Ice in winter can crack unexpectedly, forming chasms that swallow sleds, carts, or small vessels. Avalanches from the bordering cliffs coupled with sub-zero temperatures could easily have trapped and overwhelmed travelers unfamiliar with the terrain. These explanations are plausible, yet the consistency and scope of the disappearances suggest a phenomenon that may not be fully explained by nature alone. Why did the convoy vanish so completely, leaving no trace of men, animals, or supplies? The human element adds another layer of mystery. Eyewitnesses, often locals familiar with the lake's moods, reported strange occurrences before and during the disappearances, unseasonal fogs rising from the water, odd tremors underfoot, and a sense of uncanny silence that descended over the convoy. Animals behaved erratically. Horses refused to advance. Dogs barked at empty air and birds circled without apparent purpose. Could human perception of danger combined with the lake's natural hazards have contributed to a collective sense of disorientation, leading the convoy to make fatal errors? Or was there something more inexplicable at work? A force hidden in the lake's immense depths that disrupted navigation, timing, or coordination? Some accounts hint at even stranger possibilities. Locals speak of submerged Currents and underwater topography that could have drawn vessels into concealed depressions, trapping them in underwater canyons invisible from the surface. There are suggestions of gas emissions from the lake bed, a phenomenon known to occur in Lake Baikal, where pockets of methane or carbon dioxide can bubble to the surface suddenly, creating disturbances capable of overturning boats or stunning those nearby. Could these natural but rarely observed occurrences explain how men and equipment could vanish so thoroughly? Leaving nothing for search parties to recover, the historical record is fragmentary yet compelling. Military logs mention missing supplies, failed patrols, and unexplained delays in communication, but the exact dates and details are inconsistent. Some documents refer to the convoy in passing, noting that it never reached its destination, while others allude to the psychological impact on the surviving units. Fear of the lake, superstitions about unseen forces, and a lasting impression that something beyond human comprehension had intervened. How much of the mystery was amplified by oral tradition, fear, and the vastness of the lake itself? Could a combination of natural hazards and human imagination transform a logistical failure into legend? Modern exploration of Lake Ball offers tantalizing yet incomplete evidence. Sonar scans reveal deep canyons, steep drop-offs, and submerged ridges, but no definitive trace of the convoy has been found. Artifacts occasionally surface sparsely, partially, and often far from their supposed locations, raising more questions than answers. Could centuries of sediment and shifting ice have concealed a once visible trail, or does the lake maintain its secrets intentionally, erasing the evidence of human activity over time? There are also environmental and celestial elements to consider. Lake Baikal sits on it. Tectonically active rift subject to minor earthquakes that could unsettle ice and water simultaneously. Seasonal variations combined with sudden storms or temperature inversions may have created optical illusions disorienting navigators and leading them to make fatal miscalculations. In this context, is it possible that the lost convoy is less a tale of malevolent forces than of extraordinary circumstances amplified by human expectation and fear? Or does the sheer scale of disappearance hint at something still beyond our understanding? Mystery preserved in the lake's depths. The lost convoy of Lake Baikal, like the ash rain over Een, the Choco Elite, or the Tire's Black Night, demonstrates how landscapes, whether rivers, deserts, mountains, or lakes, can harbor enigmas that defy full explanation. The lake's calm surface, reflecting sky and mountains, hides a complex interplay of environmental hazards, human decisions, and perhaps unseen forces. Each layer, from ice to water to sediment, conceals events that may never be recovered, leaving historians, scientists, and storytellers to piece together narratives from fragments, oral histories, and educated speculation. Even now, as modern researchers continue to probe the lake with sonar, divers, and satellite imagery, Lake Baikal preserves its secret. How could an entire convoy trained and equipped vanish so completely? What does this disappearance reveal about the limits of human knowledge when faced with the vastness of nature, the unpredictability of the environment, and the endurance of memory? And perhaps most hauntingly, how many other mysteries submerged or hidden in remote landscapes are still waiting to be discovered? Their stories are lost to time until curiosity, luck, or technology brings them to light. From the frigid depths of Lake Bal, where a convoy disappeared into the icy abyss, we now turn to the sun-scorched plains of southern Africa, to a place where stone walls rise from the earth, defying the passage of time. Great Zimbabwe, once the center of a thriving kingdom, stands as one of Africa's greatest archaeological enigmas. Its ruins, etched into the landscape of modern-day Zimbabwe, speak to a civilization that flourished for centuries, yet left behind no written record of its rise, peak, or eventual decline. Among the most perplexing elements of its story is the emptying of the inner court, an event that has puzzled scholars for generations. Great Zimbabwe is an awe-inspiring sight. The massive stone walls of the Great Enclosure, the largest ancient structure in sub-Saharan Africa, wind in complex spirals, their purpose still debated. These towering walls, constructed without mortar, create a labyrinth of chambers and passageways, suggesting a place of power, ceremony, and governance. Within this monumental complex lies the inner court, a sacred space that was once the heart of the kingdom. But by the time European explorers first arrived in the 19th century, the court had been abandoned, emptied of its people, its rulers, and its ceremonial objects, leaving behind only the stone remnants of what was once a bustling, vibrant center. The evidence of this sudden departure is chilling. Archaeological studies show that the inner court's abandonment wasn't gradual. Rather, it seems to have occurred rapidly, with entire households and important artifacts removed or destroyed. The walls, once adorned with intricate carvings and rich ornaments, stand, and the ceremonial artifacts once housed within are nowhere to be found. What caused the rulers of Great Zimbabwe to abandon their most sacred space? What could have driven an entire court, along with its attendant nobility and religious leaders, to vanish seemingly overnight? Mainstream explanations typically point to environmental factors. One theory suggests that the kingdom's complex system of agriculture, based on cattle farming and crop cultivation, may have faced severe challenges due to soil depletion or drought. Evidence from nearby regions points to periods of reduced rainfall, which could have weakened the agricultural base, leading to famine and social upheaval. This environmental stress, in turn, might have caused the elite to abandon the inner court in search of more hospitable land. Yet this theory does not account for the seemingly deliberate and immediate nature of the departure. If the people of Great Zimbabwe were fleeing famine or drought, why leave so many valuable structures and artifacts behind? The theory of internal conflict also merits consideration. Great Zimbabwe, with its expansive trade networks and central role in regional politics, would have been a target for rival groups. Could a power struggle, either within the ruling elite or between factions in the wider kingdom, have driven the sudden abandonment? Archaeologists have found evidence of violence in some areas of the site, suggesting that tensions may have escalated toward open conflict. Could it have been a political upheaval with leaders fleeing before an impending overthrow or a strategic retreat to preserve their influence elsewhere? However, some fringe theories explore more speculative possibilities. Some propose that the rulers of Great Zimbabwe may have abandoned the inner court in response to a perceived supernatural event. The alignment of the ruins with the stars, the sun, and the moon is no accident. Many of the structures suggest a deep knowledge of astronomy. Could an astronomical event such as a rare alignment or celestial phenomenon have been interpreted as a sign prompting the leaders to vacate the site? This theory suggests that the abandonment was not driven by material or political concerns, but by spiritual or mystical experience that transcended the physical world. Could an ancient belief system based on the observation of the stars and the cosmos have guided their decision to leave? Then there is the theory of external forces. Great Zimbabwe was part of a wider network of trade drawing in goods and resources from distant lands, including gold, ivory, and copper. Could the kingdom have been attacked by outside invaders, forcing the rulers to flee? While there is no direct evidence of foreign armies invading the area, the possibility remains a tantalizing question. The ancient city's wealth and strategic location could have made it a target for marauding groups, potentially leading to a rapid and deliberate abandonment. As with many mysteries of the ancient world, the archaeological record raises as many questions as it answers. Excavations have unearthed pottery, jewelry, and iron tools, yet there are few clues as to the specific cause of the abandonment. The lack of human remains is especially striking. Did the people of the inner court die suddenly, or did they simply leave? In places like Egypt or Mesopotamia, similar power centers left behind evidence of migrations or internal shifts. But in Great Zimbabwe, there is a profound silence. Local oral histories passed down through generations hint at a deeper connection between the people and the land. The Shona, the descendants of the builders of Great Zimbabwe, have long preserved stories about their ancestors, many of which are rich in spiritual and cultural significance. Some stories speak of the kingdom's rulers being chosen by the spirits of the land and the ancestors, and of the court being a place of divine interaction. Could the inner court's emptying be tied to a spiritual event, a loss of divine favor, or a change in the leadership that prompted the people to leave? The surrounding environment, too, remains a critical piece of the puzzle. The landscape around Great Zimbabwe is dotted with other ruins, suggesting that the kingdom's influence once stretched far and wide. Was the emptying of the inner court the result of shifting political, environmental, or spiritual forces? Or did it mark a deliberate reorganization of the kingdom, a move toward a more decentralized power structure? What might the surrounding ruins, which are often overlooked in studies of the central site, reveal about the aftermath of this mysterious event? Great Zimbabwe stands today as a monument to both the ingenuity and the mysteries of a lost civilization. The inner court's emptying, along with the wider abandonment of the city, leaves us with an unresolved enigma. Why would a society so rich in culture, trade, and architecture abandon its most sacred space so completely? What does this disappearance reveal about the fragility of even the most powerful kingdoms? And what secrets might the walls of Great Zimbabwe still be holding, whispering through the dust of centuries, waiting for someone to discover them? From the windswept plains of Zimbabwe, where stone walls guard the forgotten secrets of an ancient kingdom, we travel north to the heart of 16th century Europe, to the bustling city of Nuremberg, a city of commerce and culture. Its streets were alive with the energy of the Renaissance. Its markets are filled with goods from all corners of the continent, and its skies, often dominated by the rich hues of the rising sun and the drifting clouds of late winter. Yet in 1561, something remarkable occurred in the skies above Nuremberg, something that would leave an indelible mark on history and fuel centuries of speculation. The sighting of strange celestial phenomena described as a screaming sky. The accounts are vivid and unsettling. On the morning of April 14, 1561, the citizens of Nuremberg were going about their daily routines when, as described by local records, a massive celestial battle seemed to unfold in the sky. According to the Nuremberg Chronicle, a mysterious display of lights and shapes filled the heavens, including various colored globes and a multitude of other objects accompanied by strange sounds that some described as screaming or war cries. The sky was said to be filled with shapes resembling discs, spheres, and crosses, moving in coordinated patterns before vanishing as abruptly as they had appeared. A battle was said to have taken place, with the strange objects colliding and engaging in aerial maneuvers before finally disappearing. What could explain such a bizarre event? Historical accounts from the time were written with a sense of awe and terror, but no one could definitively describe the nature of what they had witnessed. While some were quick to label it as a divine omen or celestial event, others saw it as a terrifying manifestation of something far less earthly. What was it that caused such a spectacle in the sky over Nuremberg? Mainstream explanations often turn to natural phenomena, suggesting that the events of that day could be the result of an atmospheric anomaly or an unusual occurrence in the heavens. Some scientists believe that what the citizens of Nuremberg witnessed may have been a comet, meteor shower, or some other kind of celestial event that appeared brighter and more chaotic due to the conditions of the atmosphere at the time. They speculate that the war cries described could have been the result of an echo, the sound traveling across the rooftops in such a way that it created a strange, unsettling noise. But could a natural explanation really account for the intensity and specifics of the event, particularly the behavior of the objects themselves? There are those who look toward more speculative explanations. Some believe that what the people of Nuremberg saw could have been a rare form of atmospheric optical illusion, such as a fata morgana, a mirage caused by the refraction of light through layers of hot and cold air. This phenomenon could create the illusion of floating objects seemingly moving in the sky. However, the descriptions of the objects' behavior, flying in formations, battling each other, seem to stretch beyond what could be attributed to a simple mirage. Was it an illusion or something else entirely? Other theories venture even further into the realm of the extraordinary. Could this be one of the earliest documented UFO sightings? The sheer number of objects described in the sky, along with their strange behavior and sounds, has led some to suggest that the people of Nuremberg witnessed an encounter with extraterrestrial craft. Such theories are bolstered by the idea that similar unexplained phenomena have been reported throughout history long before the modern era. If UFOs were indeed the cause, how could they be so advanced, so alien to the people of the 16th century that they appeared as nothing less than a celestial battle? And if they were extraterrestrial, what were these craft doing over Nuremberg? And why did they disappear so quickly without leaving any trace? The possibility that the event was linked to war or conflict also lingers in the historical record. Some believe that the strange phenomenon could have been the result of military experiments, perhaps involving new forms of weaponry or aerial technology, though no evidence of such activity exists in the historical documents. If it were military, why would the powers of the time choose to conduct such an experiment in full view of a populous city? Could there have been a hidden agenda or a misinterpreted military engagement that led the people to describe it as a celestial battle? But perhaps one of the most compelling. The theory is rooted in religion. The 16th century was a time of great religious upheaval, with the Reformation, the rise of Protestantism, and the Catholic Counter-Reformation casting long shadows over Europe. Celestial signs were often seen as divine omens, warnings of impending conflict or divine judgment. The screaming sky could have been seen as a manifestation of God's wrath, an otherworldly warning to the people of Nuremberg. In the context of the times, the appearance of such an event could have felt like an act of cosmic significance, urging the city's inhabitants to reflect on their moral standing and their place in the ongoing religious conflict that was sweeping across Europe. And yet, as with so many mysteries of the past, the true cause of the Nuremberg sky remains elusive. Despite centuries of speculation, no definitive evidence has emerged to explain the event in full. The sighting remains one of the most puzzling celestial phenomena in history, recorded by multiple witnesses, yet never fully understood. Theories abound, but none provide the closure that many seek. The screaming sky over Nuremberg reminds us that there are some events, no matter how well documented, whose explanations lie beyond the grasp of our understanding. Whether the product of natural forces, human perception, or something far more extraordinary, the spectacle raises more questions than answers. What was it that the people of Nuremberg truly witnessed? Was it a celestial event, a military experiment, or a moment in history that cannot be fully explained by our current knowledge? In the end, the skies over Nuremberg remain a mystery, as unsettling and mysterious today as they were more than 450 years ago. What secrets still lie hidden in the heavens, waiting for us to look up and ask the same questions? And what might still be waiting just beyond the stars to remind us that we have only scratched the surface of understanding the world? Around us, from the heavens above Nuremberg, where strange lights once filled the sky, we now descend to the vast and arid deserts of Arabia, to a place where the winds sweep across forgotten ruins, whispering secrets of a vanished civilization. In the southern reaches of modern-day Saudi Arabia lies the ancient site of Karat Alfo, a once thriving city and fortress whose disappearance remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Karat Alfo, a name that echoes through the sands of time, was a prosperous and strategic center in the ancient world. This city, with its imposing fortifications, thriving markets, and advanced infrastructure, was a key hub in the trade routes connecting the Arabian Peninsula to both Mesopotamia and the Levant. From its position in the desert, it controlled the vital routes that facilitated the flow of goods, gold, spices, and precious metals between east and west. The fortress itself, perched like a sentinel over the land, was an imposing structure. Its walls, once strong and unyielding, seemed to have withstood the test of time. Yet, despite its apparent strength, Karat Alfo has disappeared from history in an almost mythical fashion, leaving behind only fragments of its once glorious existence. The city's story, told through the relics that remain, is a tale of wealth and power. Archaeological excavations have revealed intricate carvings, pottery, and inscriptions in the script of the Sebans, pointing to a civilization that was deeply entwined with the rich history of Arabia. The fortress was not only a military stronghold, but also a cultural and religious center. Its walls, adorned with symbols and inscriptions, tell of a society that worshipped local deities and engaged in complex rituals. Trade goods, including coins and artifacts from distant lands, speak to its wealth and cosmopolitan nature. For centuries, Karat Alfo was a vibrant, flourishing city, yet it is as if it simply vanished. What could have caused this dramatic disappearance? Was it the inevitable result of shifting political and economic forces? Or did something more mysterious drive its inhabitants away? One explanation offered by historians points to a natural disaster, a cataclysmic event that would have ravaged the region and forced the city's inhabitants to abandon their homes. Earthquakes, floods, and desert storms are common in the Arabian Peninsula, and any one of these could have triggered the city's downfall. However, there is no conclusive evidence of such an event. The ruins of Karat Alfo show no signs of destruction from a natural catastrophe, and the city's fortifications appear intact, as though they were simply abandoned rather than destroyed. Another theory suggests that the city's fall could have been caused by shifts in trade routes. Karat Alfo's strategic location made it a prime center for the lucrative caravan trade, but the rise of new cities and changes in the political landscape could have led to its decline. The spread of Islam in the 7th century might have contributed to the shift in trade dynamics as new routes and new centers of power emerged across the Arabian Peninsula. As trade moved elsewhere, Karat Alfo's relevance could have dwindled, leading to the slow abandonment of the city by its inhabitants. Yet this theory also raises more questions than answers. How could a city so deeply integrated into the trade network simply fade from existence? Was there no trace left behind of its inhabitants or their departure? And then there are the more speculative theories, the ones that delve into the realm of the unknown. Some believe that the city's disappearance was not driven by natural forces or economic shifts, but by something more enigmatic, a deliberate vanishing, an intentional erasure from the historical record. Could Karat Alfo have been abandoned due to an event so catastrophic or so terrifying that it left no trace of its once thriving population? Could it have been the victim of a spiritual crisis, a loss of faith, or a profound cultural collapse that led its rulers and citizens to leave behind everything they had built simply to vanish into the desert? The idea of a city deliberately erased from memory, its inhabitants choosing to leave behind their heritage and their wealth, is a haunting thought, one that leaves us wondering if the real cause of its disappearance lies in the realm of human psychology and belief. In contrast, some argue that the city's disappearance is tied to more earthly concerns, such as the rise of new powers and the pressures of war. Could a rival kingdom or tribe have attacked and overwhelmed the fortress, driving its people to abandon the city in the face of military conquest? While no direct evidence of such an invasion has been found, the region was not devoid of conflict, and it is plausible that the shifting political dynamics of the time could have played a role. Yet the absence of any mass grave sites or evidence of violent conflict makes this theory feel incomplete. If a battle had been fought and won, surely there would have been some indication of it among the ruins. There are also local legends that suggest a more mystical explanation. Stories told by the Bedouins, who have long roamed the deserts of Arabia, hint at a supernatural force at work, an unseen power or curse that drove the inhabitants of Karat Alpha to abandon their city. These tales speak of the desert itself becoming hostile, of spirits or deities punishing the people for some transgression. Could there have been a cultural belief so ingrained that the city's inhabitants, faced with a divine omen or warning, decided to flee, leaving behind their civilization in the face of an unstoppable force? What is clear is that the city of Karat Alpha, with its grandeur and its sudden disappearance, holds a profound mystery that still eludes our understanding. The ruins themselves, half buried in sand and forgotten by time, are a silent testament to a civilization that flourished only to fade away without leaving a full explanation. Each new discovery in the region raises more questions than answers, and the true cause of Karat Alpha's vanishing remains hidden in the desert winds. As we ponder the fate of this ancient fortress, we are left to wonder, could the secrets of Karat Alpha still be buried beneath the shifting sands, waiting to be uncovered by the right set of eyes or the right technology? Or will it remain forever a haunting echo of a lost civilization, a story that time itself has erased? Whatever the cause of its disappearance, the fortress of Karat Alpha stands as a reminder that history, like the desert, can conceal its greatest mysteries beneath layers of time, waiting for us to uncover them. After journeying through the shifting sands of Arabia and the echoing ruins of vanished cities, we turn now to a modern-day enigma that has confounded scientists and doctors alike. A mystery that emerged in the heart of Kazakhstan. Far removed from ancient legends or forgotten civilizations, this strange and unsettling event has a chilling, almost otherworldly quality. It is the case of the mass sleep of Kalachi, a small village where an entire population inexplicably fell into a deep, often fatal slumber. Nestled in the vast steppe of Kazakhstan, Kalachi was a peaceful, remote village with little to distinguish it from other rural settlements. With little more than dusty streets and scattered homes, it seemed an unremarkable place, nestled against the backdrop of the endless plains. Yet in 2013, something extraordinary began to unfold in this quiet corner of the world, a phenomenon that would shake the very foundations of our understanding of sleep, health, and the human body. Residents of Kalachi began to fall asleep at odd times, often without warning. This wasn't just an ordinary sleep. It was a profound Kamioma-like slumber that lasted for days, sometimes even weeks. Some villagers would simply lose consciousness while walking down the street, while others fell into deep, heavy sleep while working in their homes or fields. When they woke, they were disoriented, confused, and unable to recall what had happened during their time of unconsciousness. In some cases, the sleep lasted for weeks, leaving individuals unable to function with no memory of entire days, lost to the void of deep sleep. The first signs of something wrong emerged when a handful of villagers were affected, but the problem only escalated as more and more residents of Kalachi began to fall victim to the mysterious slumber. Over the next several months, reports grew increasingly troubling. Entire families would sleep simultaneously. Children, the elderly, and adults alike, all were susceptible. What began as a handful of isolated cases turned into an epidemic that no one could explain. As the numbers grew, medical experts were called in to investigate. Early explanations ranged from stress and anxiety to viruses, or even some sort of psychological contagion. But these theories soon proved insufficient, as the epidemic didn't follow the usual patterns of disease or psychological disorder. There was no fever, no rash, no cough, no typical signs of an infectious illness. In fact, the only common denominator seemed to be the village itself, its residents, and the strange conditions under which they fell asleep. Some medical professionals speculated that the mass sleep was a form of mass hysteria or a collective psychological response to the stress of living in such an isolated and harsh environment. They suggested that the villagers' shared experiences might have triggered a kind of mass delusion, with the mind of each individual succumbing to the suggestion of sleep. However, the lack of a psychological or emotional trigger that could explain such a widespread event left many doubts about this theory. The situation only deepened in mystery when autopsies were conducted on those who died after prolonged episodes of sleep. Interestingly, the bodies of the deceased showed no signs of disease or trauma. What was even more puzzling was that some of the survivors reported experiencing strange symptoms after they awoke, such as memory loss, headaches, dizziness, and difficulty walking. These symptoms seemed to persist long after the episodes of sleep had ended, further suggesting that there was something deeply unusual and possibly toxic at play. As the phenomenon persisted, the theories grew more speculative, moving into the realm of the bizarre. One theory, though largely debunked, pointed to the presence of a secret government experiment. Could the Soviet-era biological weapons testing conducted in the surrounding region have somehow triggered this mass sleep? There were rumors that the area around Kalachi had been used as a testing ground for chemical agents in the past, but no concrete evidence had ever surfaced to support these claims. Yet, the coincidence was hard to ignore. Could the villagers' strange slumber have been linked to lingering toxins or radioactive contamination in the environment? Scientists then looked to the geography of Kalach for clues. The village lies near an old uranium mine which had long since been abandoned, but some believed that radon gas, a naturally occurring radioactive gas, could have seeped into the air and the water table, causing the mysterious sleep-like state. Radon exposure is known to cause a variety of health problems, including dizziness, confusion, and even coma in extreme cases. Was it possible that Kalach's residents were being exposed to dangerous levels of radon, leading to their bizarre symptoms? Some tests conducted in the area found high levels of radon, but there was no definitive connection to the mass sleep. Still, the question remains, could an undetected leak of radon gas have caused such an extraordinary phenomenon? Another line of inquiry suggested the presence of a new unknown pathogen. Medical experts considered the possibility that an unknown virus or bacterium was to blame, something that affected the brain in a way that caused sleep-like symptoms. Yet this theory too lacked solid evidence. The symptoms didn't align with the usual signs of infection, and tests on the affected villagers failed to find any clear signs of a viral or bacterial agent. Could this be the work of a pathogen that simply hadn't been discovered yet? If so, why hasn't it been identified in any other parts of the world? And then there are the more fringe theories, the ones that venture into the realm of the extraordinary. Some local legends tell of a curse of ancient forces at play that have long been linked to the land itself. Could the village of Kalachi be haunted? Or could there be a supernatural explanation to the phenomenon? While such theories are not supported by scientific evidence, they persist in local folklore, fueling the mystery with a sense of the eerie and inexplicable. One of the most chilling aspects of the mass sleep of Kalachi is the lingering uncertainty surrounding it. Despite the efforts of scientists, doctors, and government agencies, no clear explanation has emerged. The village of Kalachi is now mostly abandoned, with only a handful of residents remaining, and the mass sleep seems to have mysteriously stopped as quickly as it began. Yet the question remains, was it the result of a natural cause, a toxic exposure, or something far more enigmatic? What could have caused an entire community to fall asleep without warning? And why does the mystery persist unresolved to this day? As we leave behind the quiet, empty streets of Kalachi, we are left with no more answers than when we arrived, only more questions. Is the sleep truly over, or could it return? What lies beneath the surface of this strange modern-day phenomenon? And are there more mysteries hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered? From the quiet, lingering mystery of Kalachi, we shift our focus to the dense forests and fertile plains of North America. Here in the heart of what is now Illinois lies one of the greatest enigmas of ancient America, the towering Monk's Mound at Cahokia. Once the center of a vast urban landscape, this colossal earthen structure and the surrounding city would come to define a civilization that vanished almost as suddenly as it had risen. Cahokia was not merely a village. It was a thriving metropolis, the largest city in pre-Columbian North America, with a population that may have exceeded 20,000 at its peak. At its heart stood Monk's Mound, a massive earthwork that rises nearly 100 ft above the surrounding flood plain. Its base, measuring nearly 14 acres, would have dominated the skyline, a physical manifestation of the power and organization of the Cahokian people. From its summit, it is believed that ceremonial and political leaders would look out over the city and the vast agricultural lands stretching out towards the horizon. The mound was not just a place of power, but a spiritual center likely playing a key role in the religious and political life of the people. Yet, despite its prominence, Cahokia, along with its most iconic feature, was abandoned. The mystery begins in the 12th century. By that time, Cahokia was at its zenith, a flourishing hub of trade, culture, and innovation. Its population was perhaps the largest of any settlement north of Mexico, and its influence extended far across the Mississippi River Valley and beyond. The city was meticulously planned with large residential areas, plazas, and roads that ran like veins through the heart of the city. At its peak, the urban landscape was organized around not just commerce and politics, but large-scale public ceremonies, perhaps even massive astronomical observatories. Cahokia thrived for centuries, but then around the 13th century, something dramatic happened. The city, once bustling with activity, began to fall silent. People slowly, almost incomprehensibly, started to leave. The grand structures, including the monumental Monk's Mound, were left behind. their once proud towers of earth and wood abandoned to the forces of time and nature. By the mid-300s, Cahokia had become a ghost town. What could have caused such a sudden and complete desertion? The answer is elusive, a riddle buried in layers of soil and history. Mainstream explanations often point to environmental factors. The region around Cahokia was deeply dependent on the Mississippi River and the surrounding forests for sustenance. Could the city have fallen victim to the changing climate, with a prolonged drought or altered weather patterns making it impossible to sustain the large population? Evidence does suggest that periods of severe drought during this time were common in the American Midwest, and the Cahokians' reliance on agriculture may have made them vulnerable to such shifts. If crop yields failed or water sources dried up, the people would have had little choice but to move on. Yet, this theory doesn't quite explain the rapidity with which the city was abandoned. Nor does it account for the complete absence of a major environmental catastrophe that might have forced such a drastic departure. Another widely proposed theory points to social and political unrest. Cahokia, like many early civilizations, was deeply hierarchical, with power concentrated in the hands of a few elite rulers. It is conceivable that internal strife, infighting, or even warfare between factions could have led to the collapse of the city's social order. Perhaps the leaders of Cahokia were overthrown or lost their grip on power. Some evidence suggests that violence, including the remains of violent conflict, did occur in the region. The sudden shift from a vibrant city to an abandoned ruin could be attributed to a dramatic social upheaval that forced people to flee their homes. However, there are no definitive signs of such violence on a scale that could explain the abandonment of the entire city. No mass graves have been discovered, no clear signs of war or destruction. Could internal conflict have played a role without leaving such visible traces? Still, other scholars suggest that the collapse was not caused by a single factor, but rather a confluence of events. A combination of environmental stress, political instability, and external pressures may have forced the people of Cahokia to seek refuge elsewhere. This theory is supported by evidence from neighboring regions where similar urban centers declined around the same time. Perhaps the collapse of Cahokia was not a singular event, but part of a larger trend. One that saw the disintegration of a network of trade routes, the disruption of regional agricultural systems, and a collapse in local governance. But what if there were factors at play that we can't even begin to understand? Forces beyond environmental shifts or political instability. One speculative theory suggests that the fall of Cahokia was the result of a cultural or religious crisis. The people of Cahokia were deeply connected to the cosmos, aligning their lives with the movements of the stars and the cycles of the seasons. Could a shift in religious beliefs or a loss of faith in the city's leadership have prompted the people to abandon everything they had built? Was the sense of divine favor or cosmic balance so deeply ingrained in their worldview that a sudden loss of confidence in their leaders or in their understanding of the natural world could have triggered an exodus? Perhaps the abandonment was not driven by a tangible, material force, but by something psychological or spiritual, something that made the very foundation of Cahokia's existence untenable. There are also those who entertain more radical ideas. Could the rapid abandonment of Cahokia have been the result of an external force, something beyond the control of the city's inhabitants? Some theorists suggest that Cahokia's sudden desertion might be connected to a massive outbreak of disease. Although no conclusive evidence of disease has been found, the idea remains a haunting possibility. Could a plague have ravaged the population, leaving the city to fall silent? While this is a theory that many historians dismiss due to the lack of any biological evidence, the idea of a disease sweeping through the city remains an open question, one that adds another layer of intrigue to an already puzzling narrative. Then there is the possibility that the people of Cahokia did not abandon the city, but rather transformed it. Could the people have left to establish a new settlement, perhaps in search of more fertile land or a safer environment? The evidence of Cahokia's peak suggests that its inhabitants were highly mobile, relying on extensive trade networks and shifting patterns of settlement. Maybe in the end, the city of Cahokia was simply too large to sustain, and its people dispersed to other areas, carrying with them the legacy of their civilization without leaving any clear markers behind. No matter which theory one considers, the sudden abandonment of Cahokia's monk's mound remains an enduring mystery. The city, once a thriving center of culture and power, now stands as a monument to the unanswered questions of history. Its towering mound, the largest pre-Columbian earthwork in North America, silently watches over the ruins of the city it once dominated. Though archaeologists continue to unearth fragments of its past, the reasons for Cahokia's decline, like so many ancient mysteries, remain hidden beneath layers of earth, waiting for an answer that may never come. As we move from the heart of ancient America to the icy frontiers of the North, we find ourselves on the threshold of one of history's most chilling and unexplained events, the starvation winter of Bingia. The frozen wilderness of Bingia, which once connected the continents of Asia and North America, is a land steeped in silence. A land of ice, tundra, and long-forgotten secrets. Today, it's a place where only the most resilient plants and animals endure. Yet, nearly 12,000 years ago, this frozen expanse was the setting for a catastrophe that would shape the fate of the people who crossed it. Bingia was a vast land bridge stretching from what is now Siberia to Alaska. This region, which existed during the last ice age, was a lifeline for the ancient peoples who followed herds of megapods like mammoths, mastodons, and bison across the wilderness. It was through this gateway that the first human migrations into the Americas occurred, making Bingia one of the most important pieces of our shared history. The people who traveled here, the ancestors of Native American peoples, braved the harsh, unyielding environment, relying on their skills, knowledge, and the resources of the land to survive. But there is one dark chapter in the history of Bingia that has puzzled historians and archaeologists alike: the mystery of the starvation winter. A period of sudden and inexplicable hardship that forced the survivors of Bingia to endure an unimaginable trial. What caused this event? Why did so many people once thriving in this harsh land suddenly succumb to starvation? And what does the absence of any clear explanation mean for our understanding of human survival in the ancient world? The tale begins with the migration of early humans into Bingia. A journey that took them across a land full of promise, but also fraught with danger. The land bridge was not only an important corridor for migration, but also an ecosystem teeming with life. As the people of Bingia followed the mammoths and other great beasts, they were part of a delicate balance, an intricate web of life that connected humans, animals, and the environment in ways we are still trying to understand. The climate of Bingia was harsh, but not as extreme as the frozen tundra we see today. For much of the year, the land was covered in vast grasslands, providing sustenance for the herds and the people who depended on them. The people of Bingia were skilled hunters and gatherers, relying on the land for everything from food to shelter. Yet something shifted, something we don't fully understand, that led to a sudden and catastrophic collapse. It is difficult to pinpoint exactly when this disaster struck. Evidence suggests that by around 11,000 years ago, the first signs of hardship began to appear. For reasons still unclear, the great herds of megafauna that had sustained the Bingian people began to decline. Some of these animals, like the mammoth, may have been hunted to extinction by humans, while others may have succumbed to climate shifts, changing habitats, or diseases. As the herds dwindled, so too did the food supply, leaving the people of Bingia vulnerable. The mystery deepens when we consider the evidence of a sudden catastrophic event that struck the survivors of Bingia. In some archaeological sites, scientists have uncovered remains of people who seem to have suffered from extreme malnutrition, even though the people of Bingia were skilled hunters with the knowledge of how to find food. What could have led to such widespread starvation? Was it the loss of the megafauna? Was it a sudden climatic change that caused a collapse of ecosystems, leaving no resources to hunt or gather? Some researchers have pointed to the possibility of a sudden and dramatic environmental change. Perhaps a series of extreme winters that reduced the availability of resources, leaving the people stranded. The end of the Ice Age may have brought unpredictable weather patterns with colder winters or more severe storms, preventing the migration of animals and making hunting nearly impossible. Yet, the exact nature of the starvation winter remains unclear. Could it have been a single devastating season, or was it a more gradual, ongoing decline in resources that stretched out over time? A more speculative theory suggests that a volcanic eruption could have contributed to the crisis. Some scientists speculate that a major volcanic event, either in Bingia itself or in the surrounding regions, might have sent massive amounts of ash into the atmosphere, blocking out sunlight and causing temperatures to drop dramatically. This theory draws upon the evidence of climate disruption that has been linked to large volcanic eruptions throughout history, including events like the eruption of Mount Toba about 74,000 years ago, which caused a global cooling period. Could a similar event have triggered a sudden and intense winter, making it nearly impossible for the people of Bingia to find food or migrate? If a volcanic eruption did cause this event, it might have left no direct evidence in the archaeological record, making it even harder to uncover. As the survivors of Bingia faced this brutal challenge, the people who once lived along the land bridge seemingly vanished. The remains of entire communities were found. Their people are buried beneath layers of earth, leaving behind only fragments of their story. What happened to them? Were they wiped out by the starvation winter? Or did they simply migrate southward, seeking a new life in the more temperate regions of what is now North America? while some archaeologists argue that the people simply adapted to changing conditions and moved south, others suggest that the sudden disappearance of so many could have been caused by a loss of their way of life. The loss of the megafauna and the collapse of ecosystems might have rendered the region uninhabitable. The mystery surrounding the starvation winter of Bingia is not only one of survival, but of disappearance. How could a person who had so successfully navigated the challenges of the land bridge suddenly be overwhelmed by the forces of nature? Theories abound, from climate change to volcanic activity, but the truth remains elusive. What is clear is that something devastating happened to the people of Bingia. Catastrophe that left little trace and yet is etched into the fabric of human history. As we look out over the frozen expanse of Bingia, we are left with more questions than answers. Could the survivors have endured the winter, or did they succumb to its wrath? Was this an isolated event or part of a much larger series of climate shifts that may have impacted other ancient civilizations? And perhaps most haunting of all, what remains hidden beneath the frozen earth, waiting to tell its story? As we continue to search for answers, the starvation winter stands as a powerful reminder that history, like the frozen tundra itself, can hide its darkest secrets just beyond our reach. As we continue our journey through history's most perplexing mysteries, we arrive in the vast arid deserts of northwestern Arabia, where amid towering rock formations and ancient ruins lies the enigmatic site of Madain Salih. Known in modern times as Alula, this archaeological wonder was once the thriving heart of the Nabatean kingdom, a civilization renowned for its extraordinary stone-carved tombs and its mastery of water management in the harshest of landscapes. But while the stone tombs still stand silent, majestic and frozen in time, there is another more mysterious aspect of Madain Salih that remains shrouded in uncertainty. The sudden disappearance of its priests, these enigmatic figures who played central roles in the city's spiritual and political life, vanished without a trace. Their disappearance, unlike the fall of many ancient civilizations, was not the result of an invasion or external collapse. It is as though they simply faded into the desert winds. Mali itself offers a glimpse into the ancient world, a city built with remarkable precision, its architecture blending both the practical and the divine. The monumental rock-cut facades of the tombs are designed with intricate detail. Their ornate entrances are marked by massive columns that evoke the grandeur of a lost empire. The site's strategic location along the trade routes that once connected the Arabian Peninsula with the Mediterranean world hints at a civilization that was both powerful and influential. At the heart of this kingdom stood the priests. According to historical accounts, they were not just religious figures, but also political leaders guiding the people of Madain Salih in matters of both faith and governance. They oversaw the rituals at the Grand Temple where the Nabateans worshipped their gods, but it was their sudden disappearance that remains a source of intrigue. The records are scant, and what we know of the priests largely comes from the accounts of Roman historians and the sparse inscriptions left behind. What makes their disappearance so perplexing is that there is no clear explanation for it. Unlike the fall of other ancient cities, such as the collapse of the Maya or the eventual decline of Mesopotamian civilizations, Madain Salih seemed to lose its priests almost overnight without any recorded violence or apparent disruption. Some scholars suggest that the priests' disappearance may have been tied to a larger shift in religious practices. The Nabateans, known for their polytheistic beliefs, may have experienced a profound change in their spiritual worldview. Could the priests have been part of an older religious tradition that was replaced by a new belief system, perhaps one that had emerged through contact with neighboring civilizations such as the Romans or the Arabs? The city of Madain Salih was strategically located at the crossroads of various trade routes, meaning it was a melting pot of ideas and influences. Perhaps the old faiths fell out of favor, and the priests were quietly sidelined as the city embraced new religious practices. There are also those who point to the influence of external forces, particularly the Roman Empire. The Nabateans, known for their skill in trade, had long been in contact with Roman merchants, and there were times when the two empires clashed or worked together. The Romans, who were in the process of consolidating power across the Arabian Peninsula, may have seen the priests of Madain Salih as an obstacle to their control over the region. Could the priests' disappearance have been a political maneuver, a result of Roman intervention or manipulation? There is evidence to suggest that the Romans did interfere with local leadership structures in other parts of the region. However, there is no definitive proof that the priests of Madain Salih fell victim to such political imaginations. Another theory points to environmental factors. The harsh desert climate and the scarcity of water have long posed challenges to the people of the Arabian Peninsula. The Nabateans, known for their ingenuity in water management, developed complex systems of canals, cisterns, and aqueducts to ensure their survival. Yet could the sudden disappearance of the priests be linked to an environmental collapse? There are hints in the archaeological record that the region may have experienced severe droughts or shifts in climate during the time the priests vanished. If a prolonged drought had decimated the water sources that supported both the city's economy and its spiritual practices, could the priests have been forced to leave or die, taking their influence with them? Their most mystifying possibility, however, lies in the spiritual realm. The priests of Madasala were not just administrators of religion. They were believed to be the intermediaries between the gods and the people. Their disappearance, therefore, might not have been physical at all. Could their sudden absence be a sign of divine disfavor? Some theories suggest that the priest's disappearance was part of a larger religious transformation, perhaps a moment of divine judgment or a symbolic end to an era of spiritual practices that no longer served their purpose. Could it be that the priests were taken in some mystical or divine sense, vanishing into the ether of the desert to mark the end of an age? This theory, while speculative, touches upon the deep connection the Nabateans had with their gods and the belief in supernatural forces that governed their world. In the centuries following the disappearance of the priests, Madai and Sala began to decline. The city was eventually abandoned, its once bustling trade routes falling into disuse as the region became isolated. The temples and tombs once meticulously cared for were left to be consumed by the winds and sands of the desert. Was the abandonment of the priests and the subsequent decline of the city linked? Or was the disappearance of the priests a singular event in the larger story of the city's fall? Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the main sea mystery is the absence of clear answers. While archaeological discoveries continue to shed light on the everyday lives of the Nabateans, the fate of the priests remains elusive. The inscriptions left behind give no indication of their fate, and the grand temples stand empty, their sanctuaries abandoned, as though awaiting the return of those who once occupied them. As we look out over the silent, sweeping desert, the question lingers. What happened to the Madansali priests? Did they vanish into the shadows of history, their story lost to the ages, or is their disappearance part of a much larger mystery, one that remains hidden beneath the sands of time? As we shift our gaze across the ancient landscapes of China, a place of grand dynasties, magnificent inventions, and profound cultural heritage, we find ourselves confronting a haunting and unexplained event, one that is as mysterious as it is devastating. The black tide of the Yellow River, an incident that struck in the 11th century, remains one of the darkest chapters in the history of one of the world's most iconic rivers. The Yellow River, or Hang, has been the lifeblood of northern China for millennia. Known as the cradle of Chinese civilization, it has shaped the culture, politics, and identity of the region. The river's waters have nourished vast populations, irrigated fertile lands, and sustained countless generations. Yet, the same river, unpredictable and at times unforgiving, has also been the source of unimaginable suffering and tragedy. The black tide refers to a mysterious and catastrophic event that occurred sometime in the 11th century when the Yellow River suddenly turned black. It was an event that struck terror into the hearts of the people living along its banks, causing widespread fear, confusion, and hardship. But what exactly caused this mysterious phenomenon, and why did it happen? Despite extensive research and several theories, the true cause of the black tide remains unknown, and the event continues to haunt the historical record. At the time, the Yellow River was already infamous for its unpredictable nature. Its waters had a long history of flooding, sometimes with devastating results. The river had shifted its course numerous times, inundating villages and farmland and leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. But the black tide was different. It was not just a natural disaster in the form of a flood. The river's waters turned a deep, unnatural black, and the cause of this change has eluded scholars for centuries. The earliest recorded mention of the black tide comes from Chinese historical texts which describe a darkening of the river. The ancient texts speak of a time when the once purifying waters of the Yellow River turned ominously black, creating a sense of dread and foreboding among the local population. These descriptions, however, are brief and lacking in detail, and it is unclear whether the event was witnessed by many or was a localized phenomenon. Nevertheless, the references to the black tide have persisted in Chinese folklore and history as a deeply mysterious and unsettling event. What makes this phenomenon so perplexing is that there was no clear natural cause for the river's transformation. It was not the result of an ordinary flood, nor was it the product of a common algae bloom, which could explain a temporary discoloration of water. The blackness of the river was deep and unnatural, a profound alteration that seemed to defy explanation. Ancient texts did not describe the river as merely muddy, as is common after floods, but as completely blackened, suggesting that something far more unusual was at play. Some researchers have proposed that the phenomenon may have been caused by an unusually high concentration of sediment. The Yellow River is known for its high sediment load, which gives it its characteristic yellow hue. But could there have been a sudden and extreme increase in the amount of sediment? One theory suggests that a large-scale landslide or an earthquake could have disrupted the river's bed and caused an extraordinary amount of earth and debris to be carried downstream. This might have created a black appearance caused by the dark silt and materials being mixed into the river's waters. However, this explanation remains speculative as no direct evidence has been found to support it. Other theories delve into the realm of pollution. The Yellow River, like many major rivers, was a vital artery for both commerce and agriculture, and over time, it became a repository for waste, both from the growing population and from industrial activities. Could the black tide have been the result of a large-scale contamination event? Some historians have suggested that heavy metals, possibly from mining or other industries, could have entered the river system, causing the water to turn black. In ancient times, the river's water was often used for irrigation, and it's conceivable that an influx of pollutants, either accidentally or deliberately, could have caused such a dramatic change. Yet there is no clear record of industrial activities in the area at that time that would have contributed to such an environmental disaster. There is also the possibility that the black tide was a result of a natural biological event. A unique form of algae, fungi, or other microorganisms might have thrived in the waters under particular environmental conditions, turning the river black as a result of a sudden bloom. Such phenomena have been recorded in other rivers throughout history, where certain microbial outbreaks cause discoloration. However, the sheer scale and nature of the black tide described as a deep and persistent darkness suggests something far more extreme than an ordinary algae bloom. As we attempt to understand the origins of the black tide, we are left with a host of questions. Was the event a singular occurrence, or was it part of a recurring pattern of environmental changes in the region? Could it have been linked to a larger cycle of climate change, with shifts in temperature or rainfall patterns influencing the river's behavior? The 11th century was a time of significant change in China, marked by shifts in political power, population growth, and technological advancements. Could these changes have had unintended consequences for the environment, triggering a disaster that no one anticipated? Perhaps the most intriguing theory, however, lies in the realm of the supernatural. Ancient Chinese beliefs held that the natural world was deeply intertwined with the spiritual and cosmic realms. In times of great change or upheaval, it was not uncommon for such events to be interpreted as omens or messages from the gods. Could the black tide have been seen as a sign of divine displeasure or a warning from the heavens? The language used in ancient texts to describe the black tide, speaking of a darkening of the river, hints at a sense of cosmic imbalance or foreboding. The mysterious nature of the event, combined with its profound impact on the people of the time, might have led to a spiritual or religious interpretation that transcended mere environmental factors. As we look back on this ancient enigma, the black tide of the Yellow River remains a powerful reminder of the mysteries that still elude us. Was it a natural disaster, a man-made tragedy, or something else entirely? We may never know the full truth behind the event, but the eerie descriptions from the ancient texts continue to echo in our minds, inviting us to ponder the hidden forces that shaped the world so long ago. What truly caused the black tide of the Yellow River, and what secrets might still lie beneath its murky waters? Could there be more to this story than we have uncovered? As we continue to dig deeper into the history of the Yellow River and its mysteries, we are left to wonder what lies hidden in the depths of time, waiting to reveal itself. Waiting. In the heart of Cambodia, amid the towering stone temples and grand ruins of Angkor, lies a mystery that has perplexed archaeologists, historians, and explorers alike for centuries: the empty graves of Angkor's royal necropolis. Angkor, once the capital of the Khmer Empire, is a sprawling complex of awe-inspiring architecture and sophisticated engineering, a civilization that flourished between the 9th and 15th centuries, leaving behind magnificent temples like Angkor Wat and the Bayon Temple. But beneath this grandeur lies a deeper, more puzzling enigma: the royal tombs, which remarkably remain unfilled. Unlike most ancient civilizations where tombs of royalty are filled with the remains of their rulers, the royal necropolis at Angkor stands in stark contrast. No skeletal remains have ever been found in these grand graves, leaving historians to wonder, where did the kings of Angkor go after their death? Why are their graves empty? And what does this say about the kingdom that once ruled over much of Southeast Asia? The royal necropolis is located near the ancient temple complex of Angkor Thom, a city built by King Jayavarman I in the late 12th century. Angkor Thom itself is an imposing structure with vast walls, intricate carvings, and towering gates that evoke the power and majesty of the Khmer Empire at its zenith. The royal necropolis is situated nearby, an area marked by several large stone-built tombs. These tombs, unlike others found in many parts of the ancient world, were designed with incredible care and precision. Some were constructed with the same level of craftsmanship as the temples themselves, suggesting that they were intended for highly important figures, likely the kings and queens of Angkor. But while the royal tombs are unmistakably grand, there is a strange absence within them: no bodies. Unlike Egypt's pyramids, where mummies and treasures have been found, or the burial sites of Roman emperors, where royal remains have been unearthed with great care, the royal graves of Angkor seem to have been left entirely empty. The question lingers: why? There are several theories as to why these royal tombs are devoid of their intended occupants. Some scholars suggest that the kings of Angkor may have practiced a form of cremation, a practice that was common in some Southeast Asian cultures. According to this theory, the king's bodies were burned and their ashes may have been scattered or buried elsewhere, leaving no physical remains behind in the tombs. This would explain the emptiness of the graves, but does not address why such elaborate tombs would have been constructed if cremation was the intended burial method. Others have posited that the lack of bodies could be a symbolic gesture, a reflection of the divine nature of the kings themselves. The rulers of Angkor were not only political leaders, but were also believed to be divine figures chosen by the gods to rule. In this context, the kings may have been regarded as so spiritually pure that their earthly remains were not bound to the physical realm. Instead, the tombs could represent the transition from the mortal world to the divine, with the king's souls ascending to the heavens, leaving no need for physical interment. Another possibility lies in the political and religious upheaval that may have taken place at the time of the construction of these tombs. Angkor's decline began in the 14th century following a series of military defeats and internal strife. Could the absence of royal remains in the tombs be linked to this period of turmoil? Perhaps the bodies of the kings were removed or hidden to prevent desecration by invading forces or rival factions. During times of political instability, it was not uncommon for royal remains to be stolen or buried in secret locations to protect them from enemies. This theory, however, is complicated by the fact that these tombs are empty, not disturbed, suggesting that the kings of Angkor never occupied them in the first place. But the mystery does not end with the absence of the kings themselves. The elaborate nature of the tombs suggests a level of ritual and reverence that goes beyond mere practicality. Why go to such great lengths to construct these grand tombs if they were never intended to house the remains of the deceased? Some experts believe that the tombs may have been part of a grand religious or ceremonial practice, perhaps meant to honor the kings in a way that transcended the mortal realm. Could these tombs have been intended as symbolic sites designed to reflect the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth? If the kings were considered to be divine, their death might not have been viewed as a permanent departure, but as a transition into another form of existence. As with many mysteries from ancient civilizations, speculation about the empty graves of Angkor's royal necropolis invites us to delve deeper into the cultural and religious practices of the Khmer people. The idea of divine kingship, common throughout Southeast Asia, was central to Angkorian society. The king was seen not only as a ruler, but as a mediator between the gods and the people, a living embodiment of the divine order. If this belief in divine kingship was so deeply ingrained in the culture, then the concept of physical death might have been viewed as secondary to the spiritual continuity of the king's reign. Could the empty graves symbolize the unbroken connection between the divine and the mortal? There is also the possibility that the tombs were never meant to be used at all, or that they were created for future kings who were never crowned. Archaeologists have suggested that the tombs could have been left unfinished or abandoned during the period of Angkor's decline, when the empire's power waned and the political and religious order fractured. The absence of bodies then might not indicate a deliberate practice of cremation or divine ascension, but rather the loss of the tradition itself as the empire fell into disarray. Yet another theory involves the possibility of ritual sacrifice or other ceremonial practices that might have been performed at these tombs. Could the empty graves be a reflection of a larger religious or symbolic event, where the king's death was seen as part of a larger ritual of renewal or transformation? Perhaps the tombs were not meant to be permanent resting places, but rather temporary vessels for a king's journey into the afterlife. In the absence of definitive answers, the empty graves of Angkor's royal necropolis continue to be a source of fascination. The grandeur of the tombs, the absence of remains, and the sheer scale of the mystery combine to leave us wondering what happened to the kings of Angkor. Were they truly divine beings who transcended death? Were their remains hidden away during times of political turmoil? Or were they never meant to occupy the tombs at all? The tombs of Angkor stand as silent sentinels, to a civilization that has long since faded into history, yet the questions they raise about life, death, and divinity remain as relevant as ever, challenging us to look beyond the material world and explore the mysteries of the past that continue to elude us. Beneath the brooding skies of the Ocean Islands, a windswept archipelago off the northern coast of Scotland, lies an enigma that has puzzled historians, archaeologists, and locals for centuries. The islands, rich with ancient history, stand as a testament to the ebb and flow of civilizations, Neolithic tombs, Viking ruins, and remnants of an era long past. But among the many mysteries of Orkney, one stands out, an event so strange that it still echoes through the centuries. The night the Orkney fires went out. The Orkneys are a place of striking beauty and mystery. Rugged cliffs, dark waters, and scattered islands give the landscape an otherworldly feel. It is a land where the past seems alive, where ancient rituals, myths, and legends cling to the wind. But on one fateful night in the dim twilight of history, something happened that would change this timeless landscape. The warmth of the once fires, which had been burning for generations, suddenly went out. For centuries, the fires of Ors were more than just a practical source of light and warmth. In the harsh northern climate, the fires were a symbol of life, survival, and continuity. The islanders, predominantly descendants of the Norse Vikings, held fire in a sacred regard, believing it connected them to their ancestors and the very essence of the earth itself. The hearths were the center of family life, the glow in the darkest hours and the beacon that guided travelers across the treacherous seas. But one night, the fires inexplicably vanished. No storm, no power outage, no obvious explanation. The flames that had illuminated homes, villages, and the hearts of the people extinguished, leaving an unsettling stillness in their wake. Historical records are sparse when it comes to the exact date or cause of this event. Some say it was the year 1136, though this remains a point of contention. What is certain, however, is that it was a singular event that captured the imagination of those who lived in Ors and beyond. The night the Orkney fires went out became a legend, an ominous moment that would be passed down through generations. At first glance, the disappearance of these fires might seem like little more than a curious local event. But as we delve deeper, we see that it was not merely the physical extinguishing of flames, but a profound cultural shift. The Orkney people were used to harsh winters, to the long nights when the wind howled and the waves crashed against the shores. Fire was their constant companion, a vital part of their daily existence. So why on that night did it suddenly cease? Why did the light disappear, leaving behind an eerie quiet? Some theories suggest that the famine or plague might have been a factor. The 12th century was a time of great turmoil in Europe, a period of harsh weather conditions, crop failures, and social unrest. If Ors was affected by any of these crises, it might have created a situation where the community could no longer sustain its traditions. Could the fires have been extinguished not by an act of nature, but by a more tragic human hand, perhaps the result of a mass death, a sudden wave of illness, or even a ritual gone wrong? Another theory holds that the fires were deliberately extinguished as part of a ritualistic act. The people of Orkney were known for their Norse beliefs, which blended ancient pagan practices with early Christian influences. It's possible that the fires were seen as symbolic of an older order, an order that needed to be cleansed or redefined. Could the extinguishing of the flames represent a ritual sacrifice, an offering to the gods, or a part of some forgotten ceremony designed to ensure the survival of the people during harsh times? Some speculate that it could be linked to the arrival of a new ruler or a shift in power. The Ocean Islands, with their rich Viking heritage, were often caught in the struggle between Norse and Scottish influences. Could the fires have been put out to signal the end of one era and the beginning of another, a symbol of the shifting tides of power, perhaps marking the arrival of a new ruler or a change in leadership? In fact, historical records do mention the shifting dynamics in Ors around this time. The islands were a crossroads between the Norse and Scottish worlds, and the political landscape was in flux. Sigurd the Mighty, the Norse ruler of the islands, had been dead for several decades by this time, and the once strong Norse influence was waning. Could the disappearance of the Orkney fires have been tied to the instability of this transitional period, a reflection of the islanders' uncertain future? One of the more intriguing and speculative theories, however, involves the cosmic and astronomical. The Ocean Islands are known for their alignment with celestial events, particularly the solstices and equinoxes. The ancient Norse were keen observers of the stars, and it's possible that a cosmic alignment or rare celestial event could have had an impact on the culture and rituals of the time. Was the night the Orkney fires went out somehow linked to a significant astronomical event, one that disrupted the natural order in the eyes of the people? Could it have been seen as a sign from the gods, an omen of something far greater? Though the physical evidence for this theory is lacking, it cannot be dismissed outright. The princes have long been a place where the heavens and the earth seem to meet. The island of Stennes, for instance, is home to the Ring of Brodgar, a megalithic stone circle that aligns with the solstices. Could the people of Orkney have seen the extinguishing of the fires as part of a larger cosmic event, one that marked a turning point in their history? As we explore the mysteries of that fateful night, we cannot help but be drawn into the sense of loss and uncertainty that it left behind. The fires of Orkney had been a symbol of warmth, survival, and connection to the divine. Their sudden disappearance, without explanation, without warning, left a void. Was it simply the result of a practical crisis? Or something more profound, a reflection of the shifting tides of history? Perhaps we will never know the full truth of the night the Prince fires went out. The historical records are too sparse, and the passage of time has obscured the details. Yet the mystery remains, etched into the landscape, woven into the very fabric of Orkney's history. What truly happened on that night, and why did the flames disappear? For now, we are left to wonder. Was it a natural event, a symbolic gesture, or the first spark of a change that would alter the course of history for the people of Orkney? The answers, it seems, may remain hidden in the shadows of the past, waiting for a future historian or archaeologist to unearth the truth. In the heart of Mexico, surrounded by the volcanic landscapes of the Central Highlands, lies the ancient city of Teotihuacan, a place that once stood as one of the largest and most influential urban centers in the Americas. Its broad avenues, grand pyramids, and sprawling palaces tell the story of a civilization that flourished between the 1st and 7th centuries AD. But despite its magnificence, there is a haunting mystery woven into the fabric of Teotihuacan's history, a mystery that revolves around the sudden unexplained mass flight of its elite inhabitants from the palaces. At its peak, Teotihuacan was home to perhaps 100,000 people, making it one of the largest cities in the ancient world. The city's layout is a masterful display of urban planning. The Grand Avenue of the Dead, flanked by massive pyramids like the Pyramid of the Sun and Pyramid of the Moon, leads visitors through a city that seems to have been built in reverence to the cosmos itself. The city's palaces, once brimming with the lives of its elite residents, stand as silent witnesses to a time long past. But then something happened. Around the middle of the 7th century, Teotihuacan's palaces were suddenly abandoned. It wasn't a gradual decline, but a mass exodus. A flight so rapid and complete that the reason behind it remains unclear to this day. The buildings were left eerily empty, their walls and windows stripped of anything of value, and their rooms abandoned with signs of hasty departure. The inhabitants of Teotihuacan, once the powerful elite, vanished from the city, leaving behind only remnants of their sudden departure. The question lingers, why did the elites of Teotihuacan leave in such a hurry? And just as importantly, where did they go? Historical records from the time are sparse. The people of Teotihuacan did not leave written texts, and the archaeological record offers only fragmented clues. What we do know is that Teotihuacan was a center of immense power and influence. The city's reach extended across Mesoamerica, influencing cultures as far away as the Maya in the south. The people who lived in the palaces were the political, religious, and economic elite tasked with overseeing the city's complex system of trade, governance, and religious rituals. However, around 650 to 750 AD, Teotihuacan began to experience a period of unexplained turmoil. The city's complex social structure was destabilized, and by the end of the 7th century, the grand palaces once teeming with life were left desolate. The surrounding areas were looted, and there was evidence of widespread violence and destruction. The sacred sites and the central pyramids, so intricately designed to honor the gods in the universe, were now abandoned or desecrated. One popular theory suggests that internal conflict played a role in the mass exodus. It is possible that the powerful elites, whose wealth and control over the city's infrastructure had once been unchallenged, faced a revolt from the lower classes or other factions within Teotihuacan. If there was an uprising, it could explain why the palaces were abandoned so suddenly. The elites may have fled for their lives, leaving behind everything they had built. There are signs of fires and destruction in the central palaces, suggesting that violent conflict may have been part of the city's collapse. Another theory posits that the abandonment was linked to environmental factors, particularly the deforestation that occurred around the same time. The Teotihuacan Valley, once rich in resources, began to suffer from soil erosion and deforestation due to overarming. The collapse of the environment would have led to food shortages, water scarcity, and increased competition for resources, factors that could have severely weakened the city's ability to sustain its population. The elite accustomed to a life of luxury might have been the first to flee when it became clear that survival in Teotihuacan was no longer possible. Climate change could have played a role as well. Around the time of the abandonment, the region was undergoing shifts in weather patterns leading to periods of prolonged droughts. Austerity measures coupled with unpredictable weather could have led to widespread instability, and forced the elites to leave in search of more hospitable lands. This hypothesis is supported by evidence of other Mesoamerican societies, such as the Maya, experiencing similar patterns of collapse during periods of drought. Another intriguing theory revolves around the religious and ritualistic practices that were at the heart of Teotihuacan culture. The city was known for its monumental temples and pyramids, which were dedicated to various gods. In particular, the Pyramid of the Sun was central to the city's religious life, and it's possible that the elites believed they were chosen to maintain the sacred balance between the human and divine realms. Some suggest that the mass flight was not a result of conflict or environmental factors, but a religious or prophetic event, a belief that the gods had forsaken the city and that it was time for the elite to abandon it. The sudden evacuation could have been part of a ritual purification or perhaps even the fulfillment of an apocalyptic prophecy that had been passed down for generations. However, one of the more fringe theories, albeit fascinating, is that the elites didn't flee at all, but rather disappeared in an event that defies conventional explanation. Could there have been a mysterious catastrophe, such as an undocumented epidemic that decimated the population? Was there some unknown disease, perhaps carried by invading traders or a foreign group that wiped out the elites almost overnight? It's possible that the flight was not from a threat at all, but from an invisible enemy that no one could have prepared for. Finally, there is the more speculative idea that the elites of Teotihuacan did not disappear into oblivion, but migrated to other regions. Some have suggested that they might have traveled to other parts of Mesoamerica, seeking refuge and integrating with different cultures. The flight could have been orchestrated by a group of elite leaders who understood that their time in Teotihuacan had come to an end and who decided to begin anew in distant lands, perhaps founding new cities or establishing new alliances. However, no concrete evidence has been found to support this. As we examine these theories, one thing becomes clear. The mass flight from Teotihuacan's palaces remains one of history's most perplexing mysteries. Despite the clues left behind, the empty palaces, the signs of destruction, and the echoes of the city's once great glory, no definitive explanation has emerged. Perhaps the answers are lost to time, buried beneath the layers of history and the ruins of Teotihuacan itself. Or perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the shifting sands of speculation and discovery, waiting for someone to uncover it. The story of Teotihuacan's sudden abandonment is far from over. What happened to the great city and its powerful elite? Were they simply victims of circumstance? Or was there something more, something hidden from view that led to their mass exodus? As the shadows of Teotihuacan's ancient pyramids loom over the land, the mystery endures, inviting us to look deeper and wonder what secrets still lie hidden within the ruins. It is in the Anatolian plateau, where the sun beats down upon rugged landscapes dotted with ancient ruins. The once great civilization of the Hittites rose to power. The ruins of their capital, Hattusa, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site, stand as silent witnesses to a mighty empire that at its peak spanned from the heart of modern-day Turkey to regions as far as Syria. Known for their advances in law, art, and military strategy, the Hittites were a force to be reckoned with in the ancient world. But in the 12th century BC, at the height of their influence, something happened, something that has remained unexplained to this day. The Hittite heartland, once a bustling center of power, fell into ruin, its cities and people scattered. The precise causes of the collapse of the Hittite Empire remain shrouded in mystery. The ruins of Hattusa, located in central Turkey, offer a window into this once thriving civilization. At the heart of the city lies the impressive Lion Gate, flanked by towering stone walls adorned with intricate carvings. These ruins, which once held bustling palaces, temples, and bustling marketplaces, now stand in eerie quiet. The grandeur of the Great Temple and the royal archives, where thousands of clay tablets were discovered, paint a picture of a people who understood governance and diplomacy, an empire built on strength, diplomacy, and sophisticated organization. But then around 1200 BC, the Hittite heartland witnessed a dramatic shift. The empire collapsed, and the mighty kingdom of the Hittites seemingly vanished from the historical record. The fall of Hattusa remains one of the most enigmatic events in ancient history, not only because it occurred during a time of widespread upheaval across the ancient world, but also because the collapse remains unrecorded by the Hittites themselves. So what exactly happened? Unlike the falls of other great civilizations, such as the Roman Empire, which were documented by their contemporaries, there is a striking absence of records from the Hittites themselves to explain their downfall. The last royal inscription found at Hattusa dates back to the reign of King Tudilia IV. And following that, the written record goes eerily silent. The Hittite royal archives, which had once chronicled the lives and deeds of their kings, were abandoned, and the city of Hattusa was ultimately deserted. Several mainstream explanations attempt to account for the fall of the Hittites, but none of them offer definitive answers. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the collapse was part of a larger regional crisis that affected many civilizations in the eastern Mediterranean during the Late Bronze Age. This period around 1200 BC was marked by widespread instability, with many cities and states across the region suffering from invasions, droughts, and internal strife. The collapse of the Mycenaean civilization in Greece, the destruction of Troy, and the weakening of Egypt all coincided with the fall of the Hittite Empire. It is likely that the Hittites, who had been engaged in wars with neighboring powers such as Assyria and the Sea Peoples, found themselves overwhelmed by a combination of external invasions and internal rebellions. The Sea Peoples in particular are often credited with playing a role in the widespread destruction of ancient civilizations at this time. These mysterious marauders, whose origins remain debated, are thought to have ravaged the coastal cities of the eastern Mediterranean, including those of the Hittites. Some scholars suggest that the Hittite collapse was the result of a devastating invasion by the Sea Peoples, who may have reached the heart of Anatolia, sacking Hadusa and its surrounding cities. But the evidence for this remains speculative. No definitive archaeological proof has yet been found to conclusively link the Sea Peoples with the Hittite downfall. Another theory posits that climatic changes may have contributed to the empire's collapse. The Late Bronze Age is believed to have been a time of drought and climate instability, particularly in the eastern Mediterranean. Evidence suggests that the region experienced significant changes in rainfall patterns, which could have led to crop failures and food shortages. For a civilization dependent on agriculture, such a collapse in the environment could have had devastating effects. The Hittites, like many ancient peoples, may have been unable to cope with the sudden and prolonged climatic shifts, leading to internal strife, famine, and ultimately the abandonment of their capital. Yet even these theories don't quite explain the absence of any official record from the Hittites themselves. Why didn't the Hittites leave behind any inscriptions or any accounts of their own collapse? This absence raises the possibility that the end of the Hittite Empire may have been deliberately erased from history. Did the elite of Hadusa perhaps try to hide the truth about their downfall? Was the collapse of the Hittite heartland so catastrophic, so disorienting that the royal scribes chose to simply abandon their records, leaving future generations with nothing but silence? The sudden desertion of Hadusa, along with the disappearance of the royal archives, also opens the door to more speculative explanations. Could there have been religious or cultic factors involved in the empire's collapse? The Hittites were known for their complex pantheon of gods, and religious upheaval could have played a role in destabilizing their political system. A prophetic event or a belief that the gods had forsaken the empire could have led the Hittites to abandon their capital and flee to more remote regions, leaving behind their sacred city in silence. Perhaps there was another force at play, one that we are yet to fully understand. Was there a mysterious plague, or perhaps an outbreak of disease that devastated the population of Hadusa and its surrounding regions? The absence of the royal records could be an indication that the collapse was so sudden and overwhelming that there was no time to document it. Could this have been an unseen catastrophe, one that swept through the empire with terrifying speed? As the centuries have passed, we have continued to uncover more about the Hittite civilization through archaeological digs, the deciphering of ancient texts, and the analysis of the remnants left behind in the ruins. Yet, the collapse of the Hittite heartland remains largely unexplained, with many questions still left unanswered. We are left to wonder, was the fall of the Hittites the result of a single catastrophic event or a confluence of factors? Internal strife, invasions, climatic changes, and religious upheaval that brought the empire to its knees. And why, after all this time, does the Hittite collapse remain so unrecorded, with no royal accounts to shed light on the fate of an empire that once dominated Anatolia? As we explore the ruins of Hattusa, and as we delve deeper into the shadows of history, the mystery remains unsolved. What truly happened to the Hittite Empire? Did the elite simply abandon their once proud capital? Or was something far more mysterious at play? The heartland of the Hittites may be silent now, but the questions it raises continue to echo through time and perhaps hidden beneath the layers of history and the ruins of Hadusa. The answers still lie waiting for someone to discover them. As we continue to probe deeper into the Hittite mystery, modern technology may offer us new insights. Advances in satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, and eye-driven archaeological analysis are providing us with more detailed maps of ancient sites and helping to uncover hidden ruins that were once lost to time. Future excavations, especially in the vast hinterlands of Hadusa, might yield new evidence that could shed light on the true causes behind the Hittite collapse. Perhaps even more startling discoveries are yet to be made, potentially rewriting the history of one of the greatest empires of the ancient world. Moreover, the enduring fascination with the Hittite Empire can be attributed to the legacy of their legal system and governance. Their pioneering work in establishing one of the earliest codified legal systems in history, as evidenced in the Hittite laws, set a precedent for later civilizations, including the Greeks and Romans. The cultural and intellectual achievements of the Hittites, which are often overshadowed by the grandeur of neighboring empires, continue to resonate in our understanding of law and statecraft. It is through these contributions that the Hittites' influence can still be felt today, even if their downfall remains a mystery. Lastly, the enigma of the Hittite collapse serves as a powerful reminder of the fragility of even the most powerful empires. The disappearance of the Hittites from the historical record invites reflection on the cyclical nature of history, where great civilizations rise and fall, often leaving behind only echoes of their past. Lessons from the Hittite Empire of political instability, external threats, and environmental challenges are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. Perhaps in these ancient ruins, we are not just seeking the story of a lost empire, but also the timeless lessons of human history itself. In the heart of Milan, a city that has long been a center of art, commerce, and power, there is a quiet darkness that still clings to its streets, whispered through the centuries. Milan during the early 17th century was a city bustling with life. Its markets teeming with merchants, its churches filled with worshippers, and its grand architecture a testament to a wealthy and vibrant society. Yet in 1630, that same city would become the site of a devastating plague, one that would leave behind not just death, but a lingering mystery. The Black Death had already ravaged Europe centuries earlier, but the plague of 1630, known as the Whispering Plague, was different. It spread through the city like an invisible specter, claiming the lives of tens of thousands. Milan's streets were not only filled with the echoes of those who had perished, but with the whisper of rumors and strange accounts that have never quite been explained. The Plague of Milan was in many ways a continuation of the outbreaks that had swept across Europe during the 17th century, but the circumstances of this particular outbreak made it unique. Unlike many of the plagues that had come before it, this one appeared almost without warning, a sudden, devastating strike that seemed to come from nowhere. Milan was a city with a population of around 130,000 people, and within a short span of months, over 60,000 of those souls would be claimed by the disease. Entire neighborhoods fell silent as the people, both rich and poor, succumbed to an illness that seemed to take them without mercy. The plague's arrival in Milan is well documented. Yet the events that unfolded are steeped in an unsettling mystery. It is said that the outbreak began in 1640 in the region of Lombardy, with rumors spreading that a shipment of infected cloth had been brought into the city. Milan was at the time a hub of trade, with goods flowing in from all over Europe, and it is widely believed that the disease had been inadvertently introduced through these goods. However, the true mystery lies not just in the origins of the plague, but in the way it spread and the strange reports that circulated in the wake of its devastation. Eyewitnesses spoke of people hearing whispers in the air, faint voices that seemed to emanate from the shadows of their homes or from the very walls of the city itself. Some claimed to hear these whispers calling their names, warning them of doom, or offering cryptic phrases about death. It is here in these whispered tales that the story of the Whispering Plague begins to take on a life of its own. The whispers were not just a product of the collective fear that always accompanies a crisis of this magnitude. There was something peculiar about the way the illness seemed to move through the city. It didn't follow the normal patterns of infection. It spread in curious ways, appearing to target not only the impoverished, but the rich and powerful, sometimes in a matter of hours, sometimes over weeks. It was as though the plague had its own purpose, its own will, and the whispers that echoed through Milan seemed to reflect that ominous intent. Historically, the Plague of Milan is often described as a classic case of the bubonic plague, transmitted by fleas carried by rats with symptoms including fever, swelling, and the appearance of boss, painfully swollen lymph nodes. But this account doesn't quite explain the strange reports that followed the disease's path. The whispers, it seems, became more pronounced as the death toll mounted. Some survivors claimed that the whispers grew louder at night, becoming more distinct, while others said they could feel a heavy presence in the air, as though the city itself had become alive with the force of the plague. Some have speculated that the whispers might have been a psychological response, a collective hallucination brought on by the overwhelming stress of the epidemic. Others suggest that the people of Milan in their grief had been so affected by the constant loss of life that they began to imagine voices in the shadows of their lives. The mind, some argue, has a way of creating patterns out of chaos, and in times of profound despair, the idea of hearing whispers may have been a coping mechanism, a way to make sense of the randomness of the plague. But this does not explain why so many people reported hearing the same whispers, describing them in similar terms. And it certainly doesn't explain why the whispers were often perceived as a harbinger of death, calling those who heard them into the streets to meet their fate. Were these accounts a form of mass hysteria, or was there something more sinister at play, or sin? Some researchers point to the fact that Milan was under siege at the time, with external pressures from the Spanish Habsburgs and internal struggles with local factions. Perhaps the disease, the whispers, and the panic were simply manifestations of a city on the brink of collapse, both physically and psychologically. Was the plague merely the symptom of a deeper, more profound instability, one that affected not just the body, but the mind and soul of the city? And then there's the spiritual angle. Milan, a city filled with churches, cathedrals, and monasteries, was also deeply religious. Many of the reports spoke of visions seen by the dying, visions of angels, demons, and saints, as though the plague was not only taking physical lives, but also pulling souls into the afterlife. Could the whispers have been part of a divine reckoning, a way of preparing the souls of the departed for their journey beyond? The most unsettling aspect of the whispering plague, however, is that despite the many accounts, there is little evidence that this phenomenon has ever been fully explained. Medical records, church documents, and even local court proceedings from the time do not offer any conclusive answers as to the nature of the whispers or the mysterious ways in which the plague seemed to move through Milan. Some modern-day theorists suggest that the presence of toxins in the city's air, possibly mold or fungal spores, could have caused hallucinations, or that psychoactive substances in the environment may have contributed to the shared hallucinations of the people. But nothing has been proven, and the whispers remain an unexplained element of the plague. As Milan recovered from the devastation, the whispers eventually faded from the memories of its people, leaving behind only the quiet traces of their existence. But the whispering plague of 1630 continues to haunt the city, both as a tale of suffering and as an enduring enigma. What caused the strange whispers? Were they the product of a city under siege both physically and mentally? Or were they something far more supernatural, an unexplainable, chilling phenomenon that defied all logic and reason? As we revisit the history of the plague, we are left to ponder. Could the answers lie buried in the streets of Milan, in the very soil that once carried the whispers of the dead? Or will the true nature of this mystery remain forever out of reach, a whispered tale for future generations to contemplate? As modern-day scholars and paranormal investigators continue to probe the historical accounts, some have suggested that the whispers might not have been entirely psychological, but rather a form of mass suggestion or even auditory hallucinations caused by environmental factors. Milan's ancient architecture, with its narrow streets and towering buildings, could have created acoustics that amplified certain sounds, giving rise to these eerie whispers. Could the vibrations of the city itself, combined with the fear and tension of the plague, have induced a heightened sensitivity to sound? Some theorists speculate that the architecture of Milan, coupled with the overwhelming stress and illness, might have caused people to hear what they feared most, death calling them. Another possible explanation is tied to the intersection of science and superstition in the 17th century. The time was rife with both advanced medical understanding and deep spiritual beliefs. People in Milan, terrified by the unknown nature of the plague, might have been particularly susceptible to the psychological effects of superstition. The era was marked by a belief in the supernatural, where plagues were often seen as divine retribution or punishment. This deeply ingrained worldview could have created a collective response, amplifying the belief that the plague was something more than a mere disease. The whispers in this context may have become a manifestation of those beliefs, a tangible reminder of the invisible force that was sweeping through the city. Finally, the enduring legend of the Whispering Plague continues to shape the cultural landscape of Milan. As new generations come and go, the tales of the plague's supernatural elements remain a captivating part of local folklore. Could these whispers have become so ingrained in Milan's cultural memory that they were perpetuated through stories, passed down through the centuries, like a ghost story told around the fire? Perhaps in the end, the truth about the whispers of 1630 will never be fully known. And it is this mystery, this lingering question, that keeps the legend alive. The echoes of that dark time continue to whisper, not just in the streets of Milan, but in the minds of those who still seek to uncover the past. In the vast frozen expanse of the Arctic Ocean, where the ice meets the sky in an endless, desolate white, a mystery unfolded, a mystery that to this day remains unsolved. The Kaz Sea, a part of the Arctic Ocean north of Russia, is one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. It's a place where the wind howls, temperatures plunge to extreme lows, and the sea is locked in ice for much of the year. Yet, in the early months of 1957, a Soviet expedition set out on a mission that would ultimately be shrouded in secrecy and uncertainty. The expedition was to study the remote regions of the Kaz Sea, collecting valuable scientific data about the Arctic, its wildlife, and its weather patterns. But what was meant to be a routine scientific journey would take a darker turn. The Kurosi expedition was initiated by the Soviet Union as part of its broader Cold War efforts to assert dominance in the Arctic region. The team, led by Captain Leonid Koledov, was aboard a research vessel called the Vityaz, a sturdy ship built to withstand the brutal Arctic conditions. The expedition's goal was to navigate through the icy waters of the Kara Sea, charting the unexplored coastline and performing scientific observations that could be crucial for both military and civilian purposes. As part of their research, they had equipped the Vityaz with advanced communications equipment, ensuring they could maintain contact with the outside world at all times. But on September 4, 1957, something went terribly wrong. The last known communication from the Kara expedition came in the form of a brief radio signal, which when received sent shivers down the spines of those listening. The message was garbled, fragmented, incoherent even. It began with the usual check-in stating their position and providing a weather update. Then came a chilling message which, according to some reports, was barely audible. One word stood out in the broken transmission: help. After that, there was nothing, just silence. The Vityaz vanished without a trace along with its crew, swallowed up by the vastness of the Arctic expanse. There was no sign of wreckage, no trace of survivors, not even a distress signal. The Soviet Union, under the strict policies of secrecy, did not release any more details to the public. Search missions were launched, but the extreme conditions of the region combined with the lack of visibility meant that the chances of finding the ship were slim to none. As the days turned to weeks and then months, the mystery deepened. What had happened to the Kuros expedition? The radio signal was the last known clue, but it left behind far more questions than answers. How could a highly equipped and well-prepared expedition disappear without a trace? What was the nature of the message that was so desperate, so full of fear that it echoed across the frozen wilderness, but then was cut off before it could explain further? Some historians point to the harsh conditions of the Arctic as a plausible explanation. The Vityaz was designed to withstand ice, but the Ka was notoriously unpredictable. Some theorize that the vessel might have been caught in a violent ice shift, breaking apart in the middle of the night, leaving no survivors. The fact that no distress signals were received afterward suggests that if the ship had indeed sunk, it did so without warning, perhaps taking the crew by surprise. But what of the strange, incomplete message? The fact that it began with a normal communication, but then shifted to a cry for help raises unsettling questions. Did something happen to the crew during the expedition? Was there an unexpected danger lurking beneath the ice? A danger the crew couldn't have anticipated? Some have wondered if the expedition encountered something unnatural, a force that drove them to send out the cryptic message. Could it have been something related to the geological activity of the region, such as a sudden seismic event or an underwater explosion? Another theory suggests that the Vityaz could have stumbled upon something far more sinister. Given the Cold War context, some believe that the expedition may have discovered something classified, perhaps an unexpected military asset or technology, and they paid the price for that discovery. Was the Soviet government so desperate to protect its secrets that it allowed the expedition to disappear without a trace? Could they have been silenced in the name of national security to keep the details of their findings hidden from the world? There's also the possibility that the crew encountered something extraordinary and unexplainable, something beyond the realm of normal human understanding. The region, after all, is rich in mythology and folklore, with tales of strange creatures beneath the ice, strange lights in the sky, and even whispers of alien activity. Could the crew have encountered something paranormal or otherworldly that caused them to panic and send out a signal of distress? Such ideas may sound far-fetched, but they have persisted through the years, fueled by the mystery and the secrecy surrounding the expedition's disappearance. Soviet-era documents that have been declassified in recent years provide only the faintest of clues, and still the truth remains elusive. Another fascinating aspect of the mystery is the radio signal itself. While most explanations focus on the ship's disappearance, little has been made of the message's final words, the cryptic help. The timing and nature of this signal could hold the key to understanding what transpired. Was the signal sent by someone who had just come to realize the severity of their situation? Or was it part of a larger, more systematic distress call, a signal that was being broadcasted to higher authorities who would be able to respond? What is particularly chilling about the Kuros expedition's disappearance is the absence of concrete evidence. There have been no remains found, no wreckage discovered, not even a single survivor who could offer a first-hand account. It is as if the expedition simply vanished, absorbed by the unforgiving sea and ice. The mystery remains unresolved to this day, leaving only a faint trail of rumors and theories. Some have speculated that the disappearance of the Kurosi expedition was part of a larger pattern of unexplained Soviet disappearances during the Cold War era, a pattern that remains locked away in secret archives. What is certain, however, is that the last signal from the Kuro Sea expedition is a mystery that continues to haunt the annals of Arctic exploration. Could it be that the true story lies buried beneath the ice, waiting to be uncovered? Or are we left only with the whisper of a desperate cry for help, drifting through the cold winds of time? In recent years, renewed interest in the mystery of the Kara Sea expedition has led to new efforts to uncover what happened. Modern technology, including advanced satellite imaging and deep-sea exploration tools, has allowed scientists and researchers to peer into the frozen depths of the Karauser in ways that were previously unimaginable. Yet, despite these technological advances, the wreckage of the Vidyas or any trace of the crew remains elusive. The harsh environment with its shifting ice floes and treacherous waters may have concealed the ship's fate forever, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions. However, some believe that with continued exploration and new techniques, the truth may eventually surface, hidden in the deep, icy silence of the Arctic. Moreover, the haunting radio message has sparked speculation that it was not only a cry for help, but a deliberate act of communication. Some theorists suggest that the fragmented nature of the signal was not due to equipment failure, but rather because the crew was under duress, perhaps trying to relay a vital piece of information in the hope that it would be understood by the receiving station. Could the help have been a signal meant for someone specific, an urgent plea from a crew who knew they were facing an extraordinary threat? If this was the case, the message's chilling finality raises even more unsettling questions about what happened in those final moments. The disappearance of the Kara Sea expedition, shrouded in the secrecy of the Cold War and marked by eerie, unexplained phenomena, has since become a part of Arctic lore. It serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of exploration in one of the most unforgiving places on Earth. As more time passes, the mystery transforms from a mere historical event to a modern-day legend, weaving together the unknown with the unsettling possibility that some secrets may remain hidden beneath the ice forever. Whether a tragic accident, a governmental cover-up, or something even more extraordinary, the fate of the Vidyas and its crew remains one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries of the 20th century.